of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham and we are here, of course, for the duration. It's the start of yet another remarkable week. The first Monday in March. We have now moved into the third month of the year, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump's been in just about a month and a half now. Things are going pretty interestingly, aren't they not? A lot of people at the weekend getting very, very much of the old Trump derangement syndrome going on. Many of them completely deciding that it's a better idea to have World War III than to actually congratulate Donald Trump for doing anything. Better to put more billions and billions of pounds into Ukraine rather than actually having a sensible conversation about whether there should be peace at some point, peace at any cost. Let's have a little sort of a look back upon what happened over the course of the last few days. We'll do that in the company of Charlie Rowley. He's here with us as well. Very good morning to you, Charlie.
Good morning.
I'm going to take you back all the way to Annalisa Dodds quitting, because she did that on Friday, just after we finished our show here. She quit as a member of the sort of secondary cabinet, international aid. She didn't like the idea that Starmer basically said he's going to give more money to some people and going to take some money away from other people. We still haven't got any money, by the way. It's very difficult to work out where they keep finding it from. It's almost as if, you know, Rachel Reeves goes over in the corner of Downing Street, lifts up an old coat and go, oh, look, there's £2.26 billion. Why don't we give that to Ukraine? And people said, hang on a minute, where'd you get that from? Other people said, oh, don't worry, that's all been seized from Russian frozen assets. Oh, really, has it? Right, so you've frozen a few assets, but you don't really actually have that money, so you have to give them the money that you don't yet have, but then you'll get it back. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Everything's good. Keir Starmer parading himself around like some kind of cross between Napoleon and Churchill. The meeting of the three small men, Vladimir Zelensky, Emmanuel Macron, and Keir Starmer. It's hard to tell which one of them is smaller than the other. You know, there's a comic aspect to this, but of course it is also very serious, because Starmer's now saying that we will stay with Ukraine, we'll stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Well, how long is that? He can't tell. We will stand with Ukraine and keep giving them billions and billions of pounds. For how long? As long as it takes. All right, OK. Also, there's nothing worse, is there, than a cut-rate Tony Blair, and I think that's what we... He's even using the same lines. You know, this idea that we've now got a coalition of the willing I smell Peter Mandelson's hand all over this, by the way. 5 minutes past 6. There's so much to do, so much to talk about. We've got a load of clips from the weekend as well. Starmer loves to big himself up. I wonder why. Because I tell you what, there's nothing better when you've got a domestic crisis on your hands than to start another war. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. 5 past 6, a very, very good morning to you. I've been waiting to do this because you can imagine, Charlie, very good morning to you. As all of this is unfolding at the weekend, I'm sitting there watching it going, Zelensky, he's having a row with Trump, now he's come to Britain to see Starmer. Starmer's given him a hug. The thing that I really hated, right, was as he gave him that hug, a sort of cheer erupted. Somebody down the road in Downing. I mean, when was the last time you saw anybody standing at the end of Downing Street cheering for anything? I mean, you're going to tell me that that was not spontaneous, are you?
Well, I mean, who knows? Because I know there has been a group of people that protest outside Downing Street.
Yeah, they protest. Yeah, they don't cheer.
They don't cheer. They don't cheer.
I mean, suddenly a bunch of pro-Ukrainian people turn up outside Downing Street on a Saturday morning and suddenly spontaneously cheer as they see Zelensky getting out of a Range Rover. I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was...
does my head zip up the back, as they say in Scotland?
And I think it was a bit too much. I know Keir Starmer obviously wanted to welcome President Zelensky, to welcome him after back of what happened in the US. But it was a bit too... I think optics matter.
They do. But it's almost as though the PRs have taken over the running of the government, and they think that if it looks good, then everyone will be convinced that they're doing something good. And I'm afraid we're not that stupid. But let's remind ourselves, I suppose, of the Oval Office spat, shall we? Because, I mean, some of you might have missed it. I don't know. I don't know what you've been doing for the last 3 days, but have a look at this.
We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
You're gambling with World War III. And, of course, many people got more upset with Donald Trump for having a row with Vladimir Zelensky than they did with Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine in the first place. I mean, you think that, it was war criminal Trump we were talking about here. Harry Cole's got a piece in the Sun this morning. We're going to be talking to him later. Zelensky should have done a Keir and made an effort to woo Trump because, of course, the day before, on Thursday, Keir Starmer had been in the Oval Office absolutely buttering up Donald Trump in a way which I found quite disgraceful, actually, the way that he has sort of kept touching him on the shoulder. He gave him a letter from the King. People are now saying to him, he was asked at the weekend, should you now rescind the offer of the King to see Donald Trump? Instead of which he decided, no, I've got a better idea. We'll get the King to see Zelensky. So the King is now part of the government, presumably.
Well, yes, and I think Britain has this soft power that we often hear about.
Have we got any power at all?
Well, I think we've got some influence, Mike. I mean, you and I on a Monday morning are influencing, I'm sure.
I know we have influence, but the British government, I mean, according to Peter Hitchens, Starmer may strut the world, but he's no more powerful than the King of Legoland, which is true. Because you look at these European leaders, right? Ursula von der Leyen, as I like to call her, who used to be German defence minister, when she was German defence minister, they ran out of guns and bullets, and the soldiers were running around with broomsticks, right? She's talking about having a long and lasting peace, a just and lasting peace. Emmanuel Macron pretty much lost his country. The German Chancellor, brand new, doesn't really know what he's doing, and suddenly Keir Starmer looks like he's the leader. And I don't understand why.
Well, you're absolutely right. When it comes to defence, I mean, Europe for far too long, hasn't stumped up the cash to defend itself. That's why, and, we shouldn't be surprised by that. This is, the same President Trump that in his first term said to NATO and said to European countries, you need to spend more than 2.5% because I'm not going to be funding your defence. And why should it? And why should the American people? Why should the American taxpayer? That's an absolutely perfectly legitimate position to take. So obviously European countries have got to stump up the cash. They haven't done it before. That's what they've got to do now. But that cash has got to be for themselves. It's got to protect their own countries, their own nations.
Well, you would think, because, I mean, all of this money that they keep finding to spend, you know, they're sort of nicking a bit here, nicking a bit there. They say they're going to get some from this new wealth fund that they've got, which nobody's very clear where that's coming from, but most of it's coming from the taxpayer, it would appear. They're now saying they're going to sell some missiles to Zelensky. They're also saying, Starmer's also saying, that he's not ruling out British boots on the ground. You know, surely he has to go to Parliament at some point to have a conversation about what it is that we're committing ourselves to, doesn't he?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, no one in the UK, I think, actually wants to see British boots on the ground or in any other European country to defend the war, which is why I think President Trump is still, quite rightly, probably sitting in the Oval Office in the White House thinking that he still holds the cards.
Well, he kind of does, really, doesn't he? Because without America, there's no way that Europe can stand on its own 2 feet, because they've denuded their resources for such a long time. But let's have a look at Starmer's video that went out yesterday, because this is what I mean by the sort of the polishing of the halos that's going on, you know, the kind of the virtue signalling of, you know, we're going to stand together, we're going to be strong. Well, what do you think Vladimir Putin's going to say to that? Let's have a look.
The first priority of this government, of any government, is the security and safety of the British people, to defend the national interest, particularly in these volatile times. That's why last week I announced the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. That's also why I met President Trump last week, to strengthen our relationship with America, an indispensable partners in defence and security. And it's why this weekend I've been hosting European leaders here in London to work together for the security of the United Kingdom, Ukraine, and Europe as a whole. We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace.
Sorry, he doesn't have a plan, though, does he? There is no plan for a just and enduring peace. He's got all these characters coming to London, shaking hands. What's Trudeau doing there, by the way? I didn't know Canada's become part of the European Union, has it? I mean, he's a bloke who doesn't even know what a woman is. And suddenly now he's one of the great sort of fighting men of the 21st century. I mean, it's ludicrous, isn't it?
And I think exactly, it's all words at the minute, and you've got to match the words, and you've got to match it with action, and it's still pointless.
Well, he goes, it's time for action. Okay, then. Something reminded me of was, remember, you may not, because you're that much younger than I am, when the Good Friday Agreement was sort of announced, and Tony Blair came out and stood with Alistair Campbell, you know, the arch, you know, war criminal behind him, and he said, you know, this is not a time for cliches, but I feel the hand of history on my shoulder. And everybody went, oh, come off it, Tony. This is very Blair-esque, this, but they've actually added music to it and tried to, you know, get a director in and make it look like it's really dramatic. You know, I mean, what does he think he's doing?
Exactly, and the small print at the end of that summit was that, but we still need the US backing, and we still need US protection. So what's the point?
And also, if you think about it, you know, what Trump said, basically, was you guys need to find out a way that you can coexist with whatever it is that's happening in Europe, whether Vladimir Putin is appeased, whether he is given, you know, short shrift, whether he's chased out of Ukraine, whatever it is, you guys have got to be part of it. So now they're coming up with a peace plan, because he told them to, right? And yet still, you've got all the likes of Anna Soubry and Tobias Ellwood, who's also on the show later, going on about how awful Trump is and how we must stand together and this is the most important thing. And again, terribly offended by, you know, all of the nastiness in the Oval Office. I mean, there's a war going on. You know, Piers Morgan was on with Laura Kuenssberg yesterday, and he said, look, this is what Trump does. He shouts at people. That's how he gets things done. Vladimir Zelensky doesn't care. You know, he's in the middle of a war. Somebody's shouting at him. He's not some kind of little wallflower that's going to go, oh, my goodness me, I'm so offended, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there'll be many people that were looking at that meeting over the weekend with Donald Trump and Zelensky. And there'll be people that are hugely critical of Donald Trump on the back of it. And I think if you watch it again and again, you actually start to understand Donald Trump, as if we should already know that Donald Trump is not a politician. No. He's not a diplomat. He's a businessman.
He doesn't do it that way.
It's transactional. He's a businessman. And he gets deals and he gets things things done.
Right.
Now, and if
also, can we get past the pearl clutch? I mean, Alistair Campbell, the man that took us into an illegal war in Iraq, right, who cozied up to the President of the United States of America at the time, along with Tony Blair. I don't think we need to take any lessons from him on either one, diplomacy, because I've heard how he talks to people on the phone, and maybe so have you. So we can forget about him criticising people for being rude, and then people like John Sopel. And all these other sort of, lefty commentators saying, oh, isn't it the most dreadful thing you've ever seen? No, actually, people getting killed in a war is the most dreadful thing that you've ever seen. And anyone who supports peace wants to support peace. I mean, if the European Union can come up with a peace deal, great. If Trump can come up with one, also great. The war needs to end, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that whole meeting, I mean, I think it went on probably in hindsight. Look, nobody would have wanted it to descend into that kind of,
well, Trump
the scenes that we saw. Well, he might, but he had the ability to still turn to the cameras and say, this is the kind of conversation that people need to be aware of, because this is the reality. Right. It's not all airs and graces. It's not all diplomacy, because this is real life. And this is what matters. And stepping in for the first time, Donald Trump, to say, I'm bringing a peace to this war, because Europe didn't. And frankly, these European leaders that were sitting around the table...
What have they been doing for the last 3 years?
Well, exactly. That is exactly the question, because they'll be sitting around that table yesterday, and they should be looking at themselves thinking, if only we did a bit more earlier on, we might have...
You don't even have to go back 3 years. You go back 3 weeks, they weren't even talking about peace in Ukraine. Suddenly now they're all absolutely going gangbusters for it. Here's Keir Starmer appearing on Laura Kunsberg yesterday on the BBC, talking about boots on the ground.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing.
Yes, I mean, that's not quite Laura Kunsberg, but I mean, boots on the ground, that's a big phrase, it's a big step. I mean, everybody agrees that Britain doesn't really have very many boots on the ground, and the boots will probably be not very well fitting and probably quite cheap, and they'll probably fall apart like the ones in Iraq did, because I've spoken to veterans who were serving in those wars under Blair and under various other governments, when they didn't even have the proper equipment, to go and fight for their country. And then when they came back for fighting for their country, they got terribly badly treated by the government that sent them there. So, it's all very well talking about boots on the ground and strength, in Europe, and protecting the border. I mean, you can't even protect our own borders, We've got a mad Nigerian guy that we can't send back to Nigeria, he's a crack dealer, right? He's psychotic, but apparently he thinks he's possessed. So he's allowed to stay here because even possessed people have a right to a family life.
Yes.
Presumably he has to spend time with the devil or something.
Yes, and is he averse to chicken nuggets as well?
He may well be.
Another one.
He may well be. Maybe that's what made him psychotic. But, it's a joke, isn't it? I mean, this is what I'm saying. I mean, it's a very serious story, and we will be treating it with a great deal of seriousness, and we will be talking to an awful lot of guests. But at the end of the day, Keir Starmer has no mandate from the people of this country to do anything about Ukraine, because he certainly didn't talk about it during the election, as far as I remember. He didn't have a policy on Ukraine, did he? He didn't have a policy to bring hostilities to an end. He didn't have a policy to put British young men and women onto the very dangerous war zone called Ukraine, did he?
No, exactly, and I think that's why. And ask most people in the street today, they will not want to see British boots on the ground.
No.
In the European... Nobody wants to see an escalation of the conflict. Nobody wants to see tensions increase anymore. And, we obviously have a history with Russia. There have been British people that have died at the hand of Russian poisoning, and so we know the terrors of Russia. We know, but ultimately,
nobody in this is saying that Russia is the good guy. The point is that unfortunately, because of the ridiculous nature of conversations in this country, political conversations, if you're against one thing, you must be somehow for something else. It's not that simple.
No, it's not. Exactly.
I'm against our money being thrown away for endless years and years and years into a pointless war, as far as we're concerned, which goes absolutely nowhere.
And the American taxpayer will be saying exactly the same.
They are saying that.
And that's why everybody has got to get out of the mentality that we've had for so long in the 1990s and the 2000s, where America will just be the saviour of all of us. It's the leader of the free world. Well, no, it is America first. That's the policy of this president. The American taxpayer is not going to keep funding.
And the whole point of Zelensky going to Washington was to sign that minerals deal, which is what he should have done. They could have had other conversations at another time. But the deal is that if America has a fundamentally commercial interest in Ukraine, it will safeguard them from being further attacked by Putin, because Putin won't want to go anywhere near that.
Yeah, that's and
doesn't seem difficult to understand, does it?
No, but the only alternative is that you ask, if you're Zelensky, you're going to ask your European allies to say, right, okay, well, I've walked away from that deal. I'm still under attack from Russia. There needs to be there's clearly going to be a winner and a loser in this. And
it's just a matter of degree at the end of the day.
Exactly, and it depends on military might.
Yeah.
And
those people who are rattling the sabre saying, you know, we must fight Putin and push him back. Well, fine. You want to have World War III. You want to declare war on Russia, as Europe does, as the French do, as Britain does. Is that really what you want? Because I don't think that's what the people of Britain want.
Exactly right. No, of course they do. So it is exactly that. It's put your money where your mouth is now.
Yeah.
So, you know, if Europe actually thinks that Russia can be defeated and wants to support Ukraine, well, then you give it all the military power that you can and the finance, and you defeat Russia within a week.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen, is it?
But that's not going to happen, and it hasn't happened. So all of these
The Russians have got something like 800,000 troops, right? How many have we got? About 8.
Yeah,
probably that can actually be deployed. So let's see. Let me do a quick thing on the old calculator. 800,000 against 8. That doesn't look great, does it?
Doesn't look great.
See how much you look like Churchill then when you're standing on the battlefields getting your ass blown out. Anyway, here we are. Sharon Miller says this. Good morning, Mike, from Staffordshire. Good to see Charlie on your show this morning. He's always a voice of common sense. I'm not mad with Trump having a go at Zelensky. Zelensky deserved it. He is too entitled and thinks he calls the shots. Whatever he wants, he gets. And it's not helped him now, like a spoiled child, to suddenly pitch up in London and get Rachel Reeves. Have we got that Rachel Reeves clip where she signs a cheque, literally, in front of Starmer and Zelensky, and they both start clapping. Oh, well, we found 2.26 billion. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is, and I think... Look, there were loads of things that I think went wrong during that meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump. The first of all, actually, was when I think Zelensky pulled out pictures of people that were in Ukraine who said this is what they looked like before the conflict, very fit and healthy, and this is what they look like after. You can't verify those pictures. I don't know if those families wanted to be broadcast on national television, but I think that would have made Donald Trump feel a bit awkward and thought, hold on, this isn't what we're here to talk about. This isn't all the work that's been going on behind the scenes, because there would have been a hell of a lot of work going on behind the scenes between their teams to make sure when they got to that meeting.
And one of the reasons that there was tetchiness, apparently, was because there was a lot of tetchiness before the actual meeting. Because, you know, we know from what the Americans have said that there was quite a bit of pushback coming from Ukraine about all manner of, you know, kind of suggestions that were being made from the White House. Anyway, we've got more to do on this, obviously. We're going to be here for hours. Phil has got a voice note for us.
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. Let's get this absolutely clear. 1, we've got no hard power because we've ruined our armed forces. And 2, we've got no soft power because we are soft. And 3, Starmer milking this situation is just sick. And I really wish the guy would just go.
I mean, I think that is the problem. I mean, we can all see it. He sort of puffed himself up to his full height of 5'6.5" and has decided that, you know, basically he is going to be the saviour of Western democracy. I don't know where he's got that idea from, because, you know, he didn't ask the British public if we wanted boots on the ground, and all this talk about, you know, we're at the crossroads of history, and it's all very Mandelson-esque, isn't it? And frankly, you know, here's the other one that really burned me yesterday. He goes on Laura Kuenssberg's show, and they didn't ask him about anything else, and he said, the Prime Minister's got to go now. So you get no scrutiny on anything else. The Chagos Islands deal, is that happening? You know, what are you doing about the NHS? What are you doing about all this money that's gone south? Where are you going to, you know, find the Chagos Islands money from? You know, no scrutiny on anything at all, because he's saving the world. Slava Ukraine, just say it, and everything magically appears to be better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is... It's more damaging more than anything else, because you can have all of the meetings that you want in the world, and you can bring together whoever you want across Europe. If you can't do anything apart from just have a talking shop and make a statement at the end of it to say, well, we stand still with Ukraine and we'll be with them. But what does that actually mean?
It means nothing. There's literally, I mean, I've been sending, you know, videos all weekend asking that very question. What does this even mean? And I think if anyone could answer me, I'd be very happy to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Charlie Rowley's here. We've got much more to do. There are other stories as well, but we haven't finished with this one yet. This is Morning Glory.
His Majesty has given a very gracious invitation to the President of the United States. He's done that on the basis that he recognises and knows that America is a deep ally of ours. You know, the depth of our relationship, not only is it historic, but it's a practical one on a day-to-day basis. They are our #1 ally, and that visit will not happen immediately. We are consistent allies, and, you know, we should always work together to make state visits, support His Majesty in these endeavours to make these visits a success.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 27 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of common sense, the home of common sense, the world headquarters of it, indeed. We'll be here every single day this week to try and sort of, decompartmentalise all of this nonsense that we're being told by the Starmer government. Before we do anything else, though, Charlie Rowley's here with us. Let's get a voice note from Liam on migrants.
Good morning, Mike. Liam in Folkestone here. I just thought I'd let you know that yesterday will be the record number of illegals that have landed so far this year. I was woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning by the Air Sea Rescue helicopter. I looked online and all of the border fast vessels and the RNLI was out. Sure enough, the sea was a mill pond. It's going to be well over 500 today, mate. I mean, Starmer, he can't even protect Kent, let alone Kyiv. Have a great day, mate.
It's a very good point. He can't. He absolutely can't. And it turns out more than 500 small boat migrants across the English Channel illegally on Sunday alone. Biggest single day of arrivals so far this year. And the weather will only get better. The weather will get milder. I think towards the end of this week, Charlie, it's going to be 15, 16 degrees. No wind at all. You know, this will mean a massive influx. And so all of his posturing about, keeping, Britain safe and keeping our borders secure is nonsense, because he's simply not doing it. He can't stop people coming here. So how the hell does he think he's going to go to Ukraine and force the Russians back across the border? It's insanity.
Exactly. And if he wants to talk the talk about, as you absolutely rightly say, defending the country, well, we haven't got a deterrent to stop people making that perilous crossing and making that crossing for economic reasons. Right. They're not all refugees. They're not seeking asylum. They're here for economic reasons. They want a better life, and that's absolutely fine. We're a great country, but you can't break in. You can't come into a country illegally.
I mean, what exactly do you think he would do if the Russians suddenly started crossing the Channel, and decided to bring some of their boats across from Calais? What would he do?
Exactly. And if you want to stump up more cash to support Ukraine, absolutely the right thing to do. And I think part of that is right to cut some of the.
Well, I don't think it is the right thing to do, though, Charlie, because we've been stumping up hundreds of billions of pounds and dollars over the course of the last 3 years, and people are fed up with it. People don't want to continue to keep putting taxpayers' money, throwing good money after bad.
Well, I agree with you that they don't want to do that, but what they don't want, if you are going to have to fund, if that's a government decision and that's what they want to do, that's okay if you think it's going to help, but that money has to then come from the hotels that you're spending 600, 800 million a day on.
All the net zero madness. All the Chagos Islands.
Exactly. So all of that needs to be dropped and cut. And the only way that you obviously have that money to then help another country, if that's what you want to do, like Ukraine, is stopping this farce of the hotel.
Now, you were an advisor in Downing Street when the Ukraine sort of settlement scheme, I think, was cooked up. What was the atmosphere like then, and what were they looking to do? Because presumably back then they weren't saying in the first instance, right, we're going to send billions and billions of pounds worth of aid and weapons to Ukraine as well, were they?
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, the first thing is that when you always have people that maybe come on these shows and say, well, you need more safe and legal routes from all different countries. Well, the government of the day has the choice. It has the absolute right to say, look, we are going to support people, whether it's in Afghanistan, in Syria. In this case, it was the government is going to support people in Ukraine. So you open up those lanes and you ask the country and people who want to offer up a home to someone.
And some people are still in these houses, aren't they? 3 years on.
And they are, and that wasn't obviously the intention. I think you're absolutely. I think it was supposed to be. I think off the top of my head, I remember right, it was supposed to be for a year. It was extended for another 6 months.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you then hear stories about our own court system abusing that, allowing somebody from. I forget whether it was Afghanistan or somebody from Sudan.
There's been a whole host of them.
That's just been allowed asylum.
Oh, yeah.
Through
this was the Gaza family.
Gaza, that's
coming in from Gaza through the Ukrainian resettlement scheme.
I mean, that's not what it's about at all. Yeah. And so all of that has been abused to a degree. But you're right, you know, what was frustrating then, actually, back at that time, is that it was the Department of, what was the Levelling Up Department at the time, but it was Housing, Communities and Local Government, that would basically work with local councils and people that said, I've got a spare room or I can accommodate somebody. So we had the numbers there ready to go. It was always the Home Office that couldn't tell you who'd applied, how many people were coming into the country, how many people could be verified, because they couldn't do it. And if they can't do it from Ukraine, where it's a new system right from the off, how on earth can you expect them to know or be qualified enough to now say, oh, these are the numbers of the people that are coming into the country now, these are the amount of people that are actually here, and deport people when they don't.
Yeah, exactly right. But again, I mean, that's a side issue to what is being proposed here, it seems to me, because if there's going to be further escalation of the war, which seems to be what Keir Starmer wants, until for as long as it takes, there's going to be more displaced people and more people coming here and staying in houses, presumably. I mean, I haven't really thought it through. But let's have a look at Starmer hugging some other European leaders, because this is always good for a laugh, and check out the music they put on this video. It's like some kind of, I mean, it is Oscar season, I suppose. I mean, maybe he should put himself up for an Oscar, you know, best warmonger. Or, you know, best peacemaker. It is remarkable, isn't it? One from Graham in Sunderland says, morning, Mike. So refreshing to hear some common sense after a weekend of Trump derangement syndrome. Starmer trying to sound tough is so sickening to see. Huge smokescreen for him to do all his dirty work at home while we all worry about him putting our men and women into a war that can't be won. Great show as always. Well, this is the trouble, you know, and we are, I mean, he's right about the fact that it is a crossroads of history, because if he gets this wrong and he starts pushing Europe towards a proper fight with Russia, you know, as far as Vladimir Putin is concerned, he loves fighting wars. You know, people keep, Tobias Elwood will no doubt tell us when he comes on in the next hour that, you know, if we push Vladimir Putin hard enough, he will retire and retract the Russian forces back into Russia, and we'll be able to punish him with sanctions, you know, none of which has worked, none of which has gone on. I'm told that the Russians now occupy about a fifth of Ukraine, right? And they have occupied it for pretty much the best part of the last 2.5 years. So they've been there for a long time. They're not giving it up. They don't want peacekeepers on the ground from Europe. He's made that very clear. Zelensky says he's not going to give up any ground either. So you've got a stalemate. So what is the point of continually throwing money at it?
Well, and
because quite frankly, the war would not be even a stalemate if it wasn't for all the Western money being chucked at it.
Yeah, and I think whatever you think about Boris Johnson, I think people have got a lot of views about him. But I think the one thing that he probably got right was to say, even when he wasn't Prime Minister, to Rishi Sunak when he was Prime Minister, was to give them what they need now, give them the missiles, let them try and win.
Yeah.
And that might have had a different outcome.
Yeah. But it's too late now.
It's too late now. Us in the UK,
2014 as well, it should have all happened, but, you know, it didn't happen then either.
Didn't happen, exactly. But now, because everybody was sort of, you know, tiptoeing around the subject and thought, right, well, we'll support Ukraine, we'll go and tell them that we support Ukraine, but not actually give them anything or give them very much, but we'll do things like the Homes for Ukraine scheme, or we'll just give them money.
Yeah. But that's the other question, is where is all the money? Where is all the money that went as money? Where's that all gone? You know, hundreds of billions of pounds, and this is Trump's point as well, hundreds of billions of dollars, $300 billion, whatever it is, a lot of which was weaponry, but some of which was aid. And where's that all gone? It's not really accounted for.
No, and those will be questions that I'm sure Trump will, because he will have to meet Zelensky again. They'll have to get back.
Well, Zelensky, I mean, already all of these people again who are sort of, you know, holding their heads in their hands, going, "We've never seen anything like this." You know, Zelensky's already said, you know, it's fine. I'll go back and see him. You know, we can probably repair the relationship, because Zelensky, for all of whatever you may think of him, is a wartime president of a country. I mean, I don't think he's that worried about being called a few names.
Yeah, and if you're Donald Trump today, if you were looking at that summit that took place yesterday and still hearing at the end of every sentence the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and every other European leader say, we will absolutely support Ukraine and we're committed to it, but we still need the US as a backstop. The President will be sitting there thinking, right, well, I don't need to hear any of this because I know this already. You can't do anything without him.
Exactly.
And if you want the President to be involved, then Zelensky's got to come to the table. There's got to be the deal that Trump has obviously proposed last week. And you know, could have saved ourselves a lot of time, a lot of bother, a lot of PR, a lot more bloodshed. Could have been saved. So I think that Donald Trump is probably sitting there thinking, well, this isn't a bother to me at all.
Well, the proof of the pudding is in sensible commentators who know properly about war zones and who know about the way war happens. And Con Coughlin, who's one of the great war correspondents and a writer for the Daily Telegraph, wrote a piece yesterday saying this summit was an exercise in wishful thinking, which is precisely what it is. It's wishful thinking. I'm sure it'd be very nice if the war could be solved tomorrow. It'd be great if Keir Starmer could just wave his magic wand and everybody stops fighting and go, oh, Sir Keir, you're an absolute genius. Well done, you. But that's not how it works, unfortunately, in the real world.
You're absolutely right. And I think, you know, as part of that press conference as well, I think the Prime Minister said that there would be some European nations that have obviously they've got this commitment, but they'll be moving at a slower pace than others. Now, can you imagine, you know, if that was Donald Trump hosting this press conference, he would go out there and he'd say, we haven't got time for the slow lane. If you want to be in the slow lane, you're going on your own. Because US taxpayers are not going to fund your defence systems anymore because we're fed up of doing it. I can't do it anymore. We shouldn't be defending everybody. You know, we've got our own country to defend.
Yeah, he's got China to worry about as well, let's face it.
And so, you know, he would be putting a rocket, you know, up the, proverbial of those other European countries that are going at a slow pace. He wouldn't have any of it because he's a businessman. He will say, look, if you want to defend, if you need to defend yourself, you've got to spend this amount of money.
And the minerals deal actually is seems to me a very sensible idea. Get a commercial operation going. As somebody said, you know, the Russians are not going to bomb a Tesla factory if it's put into Ukraine, are they? Because that would be barefaced aggression against America. They won't do that. Let's get a voice note from Jay.
Morning, Mike. Hopefully this is start to a great week. Just a quick question. How can we get boots on the ground to defend not our country, but Ukraine's country, when we can't even get boots in McDonald's? The youth of today ain't going to go and fight for some other country if they can't fight for their own. Cheers, mate. Bye.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, unless they bring conscription in, which I really don't think they are at the moment considering, or at least I hope they're not, you know, how are they going to manage to do that? Because as somebody pointed out, I was listening to another radio station the other day for my sins, and somebody rang in and said, you know, say, for example, you've got a 20-something young man living and working in London. He's got his first job, he's got his first house, and you say to him, you're going to have to fight for your country, right? What are you going to do with that guy? Are you going to pay him to fight for his country? Are you going to tell him that he's going to have to lose his flat that he's only just put a deposit on and he's just been living in for a year? He's going to lose his job? I mean, it's complete madness, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just don't see a situation where that could happen in the UK. But you're right, because we've moved out.
Yeah, but with Starmer in charge, almost anything's possible.
Well, anything's possible. You're absolutely right. I mean, but we've moved away from our defence systems. Have moved away from the boots on the ground to looking at technology and drones and cyber warfare and all that. That's where all the money's gone. But now, obviously,
but that was obviously a mistake. Because I remember people telling me that.
Exactly.
Oh, you won't need boots on the ground anymore because that's not how war's going to be fought. Oh, really? We'll tell that to the 400,000 dead Ukrainians who have been shot by people with boots on the ground.
Exactly. And that last voice note's absolutely right. If you can't stop people coming into our own country where there's a border, there's a sea, there's a channel crossing between us and France and people that are going, then how on earth can you sort of expect people to be on a land border or be able to sort of stop whatever's going on?
We're going to have to stop in a minute because otherwise we're going to get in terrible trouble with the producer who's just back. The point is that, you know, we've got all of these land borders in Europe and we keep being told by people like Tobias Elwood, the Russians are terribly dangerous. If you don't stop them now, they'll be invading Poland, they'll be invading Finland. Well, they haven't done any of that. And then by the same logic, they say, well, don't worry, if we keep beating them for another 6 months or a year, they won't be able to invade anywhere. Well, which is it? They can't have it both ways.
Well, quite, because they've invaded Ukraine, Russia's invaded Ukraine, and Europe did, I wouldn't say they did nothing, but they obviously haven't been effective enough in preventing that. So
And also, Russia invaded Ukraine for a reason, because they think they should own part of it. They don't think they should own part of Poland. They don't think they should own part of Finland.
But I would be terrified if I was in Poland and I was thinking, oh, Russia might invade us. And I mean, I wouldn't be looking to Europe to think, oh, they're going to be the great defender.
Which is why they're spending 4.1% of their GDP.
Exactly.
And that's the way it goes. Listen, we're running terribly late. 6:40. I'm Mike Graham. Charlie Rowley's here as well. We've got a couple of other stories to mention because we'll vary in and out of this story all the way through the day. One from Steve in Cambridge. Morning, Mike. What a joke Starmer is. He can't defend our borders being invaded. So why is he bigging himself up with Zelensky saying we need defence in Europe? Britannia first, Starmer, you fool. People are not happy with him, I have to say. This is Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here then. Lots more to talk about between now and then. A lot of other stories to go at. Charlie Rowley's here, of course. The woes domestically, of course, are not going away for Keir Starmer, which is why you might say this is a nice little distraction for him. High Street jobs woes to continue, says on page 2 of The Sun. Shops, pubs and high street businesses will keep cutting jobs as the budget adds to rising costs, and that's just before we get to April, when all of these new national insurance rises kick in. And a lot of businesses are saying we're not going to have a very good year. If we can get through the first quarter, we'll be feeling pretty lucky.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So they're going to be hit by 3 things. It's the national insurance contributions that came in the budget, something that Labour government said that they were never going to do. Right. There's obviously an increase in the minimum wage, which I think most people can support, but it is obviously just another burden for business that they've got to front. And business rates. So, you know, councils that are charging more for business rates, councils are strapped for cash for whatever reasons, whether they're not getting enough from central government or whether they're just, you know, mismanaging their own funding. So businesses are going to have to stump up all of these 3 big things, which means job losses, which either means
millions and millions of pounds are going to have to find a lot of people, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and so it means either empty high streets now or empty units or young people that would be going into those kind of entry-level jobs are not getting the work.
This is another thing they keep saying, that in order to fund all of this madness, whether it's the Chagos Islands or whether it's Ukraine, they're going to have to basically raid welfare. They're going to have to get people back to work. But one of the other things they say they're going to do is sack a load of civil servants. They say apparently, is it something like 150,000 more civil servants now work in the civil service in the last few years, many of whom hired by the Tories. But so they're going to make a load of people redundant, and then they're going to try and get a load of other people back into work. You know, it sounds like the sort of politics of a madman, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's trying to, you know, trim the fat, but also you're right, but then you're adding to it all the time.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make much sense.
And meanwhile, for those people who are managing to stay in their jobs, the Workers' Rights Bill is being completely and utterly torn to shreds by various people inside Cabinet. This was Angela Rayner's baby, basically. But Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, still there, despite the fact that he's not a solicitor, pretended to be one. And Rachel Reeves are apparently saying they don't want to put any more burdens on business. Oh, really?
Well,
it's news to them.
Yeah, and they went around the country sort of the last year or so saying that they were now the party of business, how they'd sort of courted them, how they'd learned, and how they'd, you know, learned from the mistakes of the Tories for taxing too much and for putting in too much regulation, not cutting enough regulation anymore. And they've now obviously put on all the...
Well, we'll come back to that old joke they used to say in America in the 80s, you know, how do you start a small business in Britain? You start out with a big one, and then just watch it shrink and become absolutely, completely, utterly useless. 1 in 3 firms, meanwhile, are freezing hiring, according to the Daily Mail. This is from an accounting firm survey, BDO. Not only are they now freezing hiring, but they're also hiring robots instead of people.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, the AI revolution continues.
The AI revolution, and you know, if it's fascinating if you look across the pond again to sort of, you know, what's happening in America, where they're getting rid of, you know, where they're looking at things like Doge, which I've called it Dodge for some time. But
yes,
you know,
Dodge is good. I don't mind that.
But
Doge sounds a bit so sort of, you know, French, doesn't it? It sounds like something out of sort of Versailles and Louis XIV.
Exactly. But the Donald Trump, he keeps giving examples of people that might still be on the books on government payroll that are now 105.
Yeah,
or 102.
No, there's a couple of there's a few million 200-year-olds.
These people don't exist.
No.
And yet they are still on payroll, or they're still doing a job that people, because it's just over a bloated system.
Yeah, and you can be sure that that's exactly what's happening here as well, right?
Exactly.
No question at all. One thing that is always something that you can rely on, though, I don't know if you've seen page 13 in the Daily Mail, it's a great picture of Emma Thompson, Dame Emma Thompson, dressed up at a master ball because she's thrown a big party in Venice, including guests like Johnny Depp, Kylie Minogue. She's at some kind of film fair, Venice's 18th century golden age of carnival. She's celebrating. And I mean, you know how she doesn't like to use planes because, you know, she's very much against that. She does live, well, there's pictures. She lives in Los Angeles. She's dressed up in sort of powdered curls, a corset and a cape, and wearing a mask. She disguised herself with her crimson period dress and matching lipstick, complete with a drawn-on beauty spot, like an 18th century aristocrat. That's kind of what she is, really, an 18th century aristocrat, isn't it?
Well, it's a classic example of do as I say, not as I do. And you're absolutely right. She flew thousands of miles in a private jet, I think, to lead a protest.
She did.
Against fossil fuels.
Yeah.
So you've travelled.
And then she was pictured on a super yacht, you know, while she was in Europe during the summer.
But it's the hypocrisy of the... But this is what riles people up, and this is why it's the home of comments. Because millions of people will be listening to this, and they'll be reading that story today thinking, how out of touch, and what kind of...
they're being told to stop driving, they're being told to stop flying anywhere, or else you're going to be paying more tax. Get a heat pump, you know, get rid of that gas boiler you've got. Net zero has made us poorer, according to analysis by the investment bank Peel Hunt, shows a decline in electricity supply since the early 2000s coincided with much slower growth in living standards. You know, basically electricity is in decline. That doesn't sound good to me, you know, especially since we're supposed to be using more electricity.
Yeah, exactly. And the two things don't add up. So, you know, as you say, when you put more burden on people, whether it's through heat pumps or whether it's through having electronic vehicles or where there's no charging stations. And
I mean, think of this, right? So Keir Starmer straddling the globe, right, Colossus style, going, listen, I'm going to save everybody. We haven't got enough electric charging points for our own cars, right? This is the state of Britain at the moment. Talk a good game, do nothing, make out that you're, you know, the cleverest man in the room, when in fact you're not.
Yeah, exactly. And all the while continue to
what a terrible indictment of where we are.
Yeah, I think you're right. And all the while saying how much of a threat, you know, we face from China, and that I don't think that is untrue. I do think that is true. But if you look at what they do in China and Japan, you know, in the Far East, you know, they can build bridges and tunnels and HS2 high-speed rail networks within, you know, about 2 weeks. We took about 20 years.
Oh, I know. We've been talking about a third runway at Heathrow for at least 30 years, haven't we? I mean, goodness gracious. Let's get a voice note from Ram.
So Starmer and Reeves pledging so much money to Ukraine. I think they said they sent in $2 billion out of nowhere from seized Russian assets. If they had that sort of money, how come we had a £22 billion black hole? How come they had to cut the winter fuel allowance. How come we were so skint? Suddenly they found money lying round. You can pull out 2.5 billion, I think it is, from nowhere.
I mean, well, they found the chequebook, right? I think we can look at this now because this is Rachel Reeves taking quality time away from her family to spend time signing cheques on behalf of the great British nation. Have a look.
Thank you so much, Minister, for being able to join us today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's another 2 billion going south. Let's all give a big round of applause. Brilliant. Well done. Who's next? You know, who else? Oh, somebody waiting outside. Oh, I don't know. Some bloke from Ethiopia. How would you like about 6 billion a day to put some people up in a hotel? Absolutely fine, no problem at all. It's a joke, isn't it?
Well, it is. And Ram, that voice, I think is from Wales, and I think the people of Wales are speaking a lot of sense at the minute.
Yes.
But you know, you're absolutely right. When you come into government and you've taken away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners, when you've hiked taxes on businesses,
going
when you
after
said
farmers,
going after the farmers, and to say, oh, the terrible Tories, and I don't for a second think that there weren't mistakes that were made. Of course there were, but all of this terrible stuff that happened after the last government, we've got this huge black hole, we need to fund it, and so we've got to do all these terrible things, sorry, but not our fault. Then, all of a sudden, to be able to just, you know, out of thin air, pluck out all of this...
Oh, it's a national emergency. You know. By the way, speaking of attacking the farmers, have you seen what's happening? There's a farmers' protest going on Tuesday in Westminster, right? The Metropolitan Police, bless their cotton socks, have come out and said if any tractors come into central London without prior arrangement with the police, the drivers of those tractors will be arrested. So they're now going to start arresting farmers for trying to make a legal demonstration which has been planned for quite some time.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you hear so often about this two-tier policing system under Sir Keir Starmer, I think it's just, this is another example when you have those, you know, crackpots that sort of, you know, parade themselves across the street as, you know, Just Stop Oil or whatever.
The Palestinian lot.
But you can't touch them. You can't touch a sort of a happy-go-lucky kumbaya, you know, let's all hold hands.
No, you can make them tea, you know, talk to them.
Tea, exactly. Yes, and ask them politely, would you mind terribly just moving along in your orange jumpsuit or paint? Or, but you can't. But our farmers, the people that keep us fed and watered, they'll be, you know, thrown into the back of the police car and halted off somewhere. It's ridiculous.
It is totally mad. 6:52. Lots going on. This is the first hour of what is going to be a very, very busy show. Do send us a voice note. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can text us on 87222. You can find us on X at talkTV. Charlie Rowley's here. Coming back, I'll be telling you about the BBC. They're in yet more trouble over that Gaza documentary. Things are not looking good over there. This is Talk.
I think in some ways Donald Trump perhaps wouldn't understand Zelensky as a man. I mean, he's been very keen to kind of undermine Zelensky and talk down to him. But the idea, I think, that somebody would have the amount of integrity or principles that Zelensky has, I think, is very much a mystery to Donald Trump, who's not a man who would, you know, die for his country or for the people in it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you until 10 o'clock, of course. Charlie Rowley's here as well. Just reading Edward Lucas in The Times here, a comment piece about how this last European summit of the weekend was not as disastrous as one that Emmanuel Macron held 2 weeks ago, which was absolutely and utterly awful. The main glitch, the failure, though, of this particular summit to invite Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, the countries that are actually on the front line in the Russian situation, feeling more than miffed, basically, because they weren't actually asked to attend. So, I mean, you know, it's not exactly, they're not even thinking it through either. Let's talk about the BBC, because it turns out the most senior news executive at the BBC watched that controversial Gaza documentary, which was called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. It's had the BBC at the front line of an awful lot of criticism since 2 weeks ago when it was first broadcast. Turns out Deborah Turness, the chief executive of BBC News and Current Affairs, was a guest at a special BBC screening held almost 3 weeks prior to the show actually airing. She didn't have any questions, apparently. She thought it was great and let it go out. Brilliant.
Yeah, and Deborah Jones earns about £410,000 a year, so that's not a small amount of money.
And that's before you put the expenses bill in as well, by the way.
Exactly. And when you're brought in to be the sort of person that ultimately bears responsibility for fact-checking things, it took an investigative journalist about a couple of hours to work out that this was the son of someone.
Well, I said this, I mean, I've been saying it all of last week. You know, surely you asked the question, have we checked this boy out? Are you sure this Abdullah, aged 13, has got absolutely no connections to Hamas? Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're living and operating in Gaza, there's a chance that you might. Yeah. And it turns out his dad is not only in Hamas, but he's a government minister in Hamas.
Exactly. It is one of the most... obvious questions. You're absolutely right. It's one of the most obvious questions to ask straight up, to say, who is this kid? What's the connection? Is there a connection? And those answers never came forward. And so the absence of an answer should ring alarm bells to say, oh, if we haven't had that answered after however many times of asking, if that was asked, then that should sound the alarm no end.
It tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it, about the BBC? They just assume that everyone in Gaza is good and, you know, everyone in Israel's bad. That's basically their point of view.
And when the BBC won't bring itself to actually say that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, it tiptoes around it and describes it as some sort of military movement.
Yeah, they care. Prescribed organisation. Well, Gary Lineker thinks that you can be in Hamas and not be a terrorist. Because he wrote a letter to the BBC saying that, you know, this guy's father was a Hamas government minister, not a terrorist.
Well, you know...
thanks, Gary.
And which is why Gary is
maybe stick to the FA Cup.
Much more suited to the football rather than, I think, you know, global affairs.
Yeah, absolutely right. Final story, because we're nearly out of time. Cost-cutting threatens plan to tackle NHS waiting lists. Apparently, there's a new deal which is about to collapse, in which private hospitals help the NHS out and take patients for certain operations. That deal is apparently about to collapse because there's no money for it anymore, because, of course, we've got to sell off the Chagos Islands and help out Ukraine. So good luck getting your hip operation.
Well, happy days. Don't be ill. Don't get ill, folks.
You probably get more chance of getting treated if you go to Ukraine, actually. You know, the waiting lists there are a lot shorter. Unbelievable stuff. Charlie, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Receive my sticker on Saturday. Got to get my car clean before I display it with pride, says Lee in Walsall. Yeah, if you've got your stickers, don't forget to send us pictures in so that we can tell everybody else. This is Morning Glory. We've got loads more coming up after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia at the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 7. The sun is up. It's looking very hazy out there today. It's the first Monday in March. Welcome to the home of common sense. Welcome to the first conversation I've been able to have about all of the dramatic events over the weekend, starting off with the resignation, believe it or not. I know it seems like a very small thing now, of Annalisa Dodds. You know, this is a woman who has been formerly the shadow chancellor of the Labour Party when they were in opposition. She was kind of dumped over the side to get Rachel Reeves in. That didn't work out so well for the rest of the country, did it? But Annalisa Dodds said apparently that she couldn't stomach the idea that money was going to be taken away from international aid in order to be given to somebody else, in order for the government to somehow bolster its defence. She's not in favour of defending her own land. Well, we're going to be talking to Tobias Elwood coming up in this hour. He's former Defence Select Committee chair, of course, a man who's spoken about Ukraine many times. He's also said that, you know, the new plan by Europe may well offer some hope. But what is the new plan exactly? We'll be asking him what he thinks it is and why he also thinks that it might be a bad idea for the King to have a state visit with Donald Trump, even though it was offered by Keir Starmer only last Thursday. Let's not forget there was a bit of a bust-up in the Oval Office. Some people got their knickers in a twist massively because Volodymyr Zelensky got offended. Well, I don't think he did get offended. I'm not sure he's offended now. He's already said thank you to America for the visit, and he's already said that he's more than happy to rekindle whatever their relationship was before. We can all fall around and talk about how awful it was. We can all take offence at it. At the end of the day, Trump is getting things done. He wanted a peace deal to be dreamed up in Europe. That's what they're now working on. So exactly which bit of that has he got wrong? 0344 499 1000. Maggie in London says, Starmer going around like Superman trying to save the world. How about he starts with saving the UK first? The man is an absolute joke. And there's certainly a lot of talk this morning from the listeners and the viewers to this show that Starmer cannot even secure his own borders. What on earth is he going to do trying to secure Ukraine's borders as well? 0344 499 1000. We'll have Harry Cole a little bit later on in the show as well. He's got a big column. He's political editor of The Sun, of course. He's got a column in The Sun in which he says Zelensky should have taken a leaf out of Keir Starmer's book and actually been a bit more charming with Donald Trump. And maybe he could have got the minerals deal signed. He could be halfway towards getting some kind of deal struck with Russia. It's all very, very confusing, isn't it? 0344 499 1000. Do you really want to send your kids to fight for Ukraine in a war which might not have an end except a bad one? This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Glenn from Leeds has got a good idea for the farmers. Throw some Palestinian flags on the tractors and plod won't go anywhere near them. That is a very good idea indeed. This is, of course, on the news that the Metropolitan Police, by the way, have said that if anybody comes up to London to demonstrate as a farmer, and if they bring a tractor that they haven't previously got permission to bring, they will be arrested. So now, not only are they taking away their farms, not only are they taking away their ability to pass those farms on through, the ability to give their life's work to their children, they're now going to start arresting farmers because they don't like them. Absolutely incredible. One here from Steve, who says, has Cruella de Thieves actually borrowed more to ramp up our debt so Starmer can loan Zelensky the extra $2 billion? This government of insanity just gets worse. Well, they keep claiming that they've got this money because it was seized from Russian assets. I'm not quite sure how that works. Let's talk to Tobias Elwood, though, former Defence Select Committee Chair. Tobias, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
So, here we are. We're not quite sure where we are, but we're somewhere. A peace deal apparently is being worked upon by the people of Europe, which is kind of what Donald Trump wanted them to do in the first place. So, but they don't seem to know exactly what the plan is. They just have said that they want to have a plan.
Yes, but to be clear, what Donald Trump was wanting to do was secure a deal that was on Russia's terms. So after those really unfortunate events in the White House, which I think took everybody by surprise, Britain and Europe have had a better day yesterday, moving prospects of how we confront Russia and end this war in Europe from those theatrics that we saw in the White House. We're in, I think, a more professional space.
But isn't this just a different kind of theatrics, though? Because you've got Keir Starmer talking about, stepping up and standing with Ukraine for as long as it takes. I don't know what that means. Maybe you can explain it. Talking about how he's not going to rule out having British boots on the ground. I don't think he should be doing that without consultation with Parliament and perhaps without even consultation with the nation. And also, most of the European leaders just 3 weeks ago had no clue about peace in Ukraine, didn't even talk about it, never mentioned it, and have suddenly now been galvanised into it by Donald Trump. And you say that he was trying to do a deal with Putin. You don't really know that, because everything that Trump does turns into something else. I mean, the previous week before Zelensky went to Washington, everyone was saying, oh, he's rowing Zelensky out of the deal. Well, then he turned up in D.C.
Let me unpick that a little bit. Firstly, what happens in Ukraine doesn't stay in Ukraine. So in response to some of the callers that said, why does this interest me? If war starts to grow there, it will impact, and it's impacting on us already. Daily, we are attacked by Russia in the grey zone, whether it's been those cables in the English Channel, or whether it's cyber attacks and so on, disinformation, coercion. It is happening and going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a real war in Ukraine, and if that fire isn't put out, it will spread. So why
have they only started talking about it in the last 4 days then?
I don't know why. But
well, you should know. You used to be chair of the Select Committee in Defence. Why didn't you talk about it then?
Well, you have to firstly let me finish the sentence before you then ask me.
Well, I don't actually have to do anything, Tobias, but you carry on.
Well, then don't invite me on your show, sir. If you want my views...
Well, don't come on my show if you can't put up with me questioning you.
I enjoy hearing your questions. You've got to enjoy... give me a bit of latitude.
I haven't got to enjoy it, actually. But carry on. I am enjoying it, so carry on.
Right, we're wandering way off the point here. This is far more important. The basis of the current discussions that took place yesterday was actually about continued military support for Ukraine and continued economic pressure on Russia, recognizing that if Ukraine fails or is able to cede any territory, Russia will rearm, regroup, and do it all again, and that will impact us. This is 1938 all over again. And what I'm afraid that Donald Trump was doing was appeasement. So what we've done, Britain and France and others, has taken over responsibility for crafting a potential peace deal rather than America and Russia doing this. And there seems to be unity with a sense of purpose now that we can actually support Ukraine because they're doing the fighting for us.
Yes, but the point is, though, surely, Tobias, even Keir Starmer says that they cannot do it alone, that Europe alone cannot do a peace deal with Vladimir Putin in Ukraine because they need America's backing.
Absolutely, it's better to have America's backing.
Well, no, they need it.
Is absolutely huge. But look at what America is doing. America is choosing to call Zelensky a dictator, not Putin. America is actually redefining who started the war. That's the narrative that's coming out.
It's not really, though. That's the narrative. No, all right, we'll get on with it.
Let me finish my point. America chose to vote with Belarus, North Korea, and Russia at the United Nations. America is openly siding itself with Russia. That is what's happening now, whether we like that or not.
Do you understand why, though?
Up there, that is what's happening.
But do you not understand why?
We have to ask ourselves, what do we then do about it? Because there are massive geopolitical consequences if this happens.
All right.
So America is less interested in any peace deal than Ukraine. America wants the minerals, wants some of that money back. But ultimately, we're left picking up the situation here in Europe with Russia given space to be able to do all this all again, pushing further west. That's what we're facing right now. And that's why it's so important that Europe does lean in. One thing I agree with Donald Trump, we should have been spending far more on defense. I've been saying this for the last 4 years now.
Well, you were in government, right? You were in government when this started, Tobias. You were the chair of the Defence Select Committee. Why weren't you pushing to spend more money then?
I was many times. An article in the Times, I was looking back at it, 2019, calling for 3%. By the way, being chair of the Select Committee doesn't put me in government. It actually scrutinises. That's what we do. We scrutinise government.
Well, you didn't do it very well, did you?
Well, you can say whatever you like. The evidence.
Well, you also lost your seat at the last election, so I mean, you haven't got a lot of friends in the room. But let me ask you this: Keir Starmer agrees with Donald Trump. He says Donald Trump wants lasting peace. He does not say that he's appeasing Vladimir Putin. So either he's wrong about that, or you are. Have a look.
Well, I'm afraid
have a look at the clip.
Well, I'm clear in my mind that he wants a lasting peace. That comes from my discussions with him on Thursday. We had extensive discussions. I've obviously met him before that, back in September in New York, and I've talked to him a number of times on the phone, including Friday night and Saturday night. So my strong view is that he wants a lasting peace, and I agree with him about that. President Zelensky agrees with him about that, and I think nobody wants this conflict to go on, least of all the Ukrainians. It's not in our national interest.
So you must be wrong about that then.
I'm making it very clear from where I sit, and I study these things very, very carefully, and I'm a dual national, so I say this with some sadness, that we're seeing an absolute change in geopolitics between Russia and America. And there's a bigger picture here where I believe that Donald Trump no longer is interested in supporting the global order. He sees the world order fragmenting. He sees the world where there's a number of big beasts, if you like, geopolitical power bases, of which America is one, Russia is another. They each have their sphere of influence, and Ukraine, I'm afraid, does not fall in America's sphere of influence as Panama or Greenland or Canada does, but Ukraine falls in Russia's sphere of influence, and America, Donald Trump, will respect that because he respects President Putin. That's where I believe the world is going. Now, you and I can disagree about this, but history will prove one way or another. And as I say, the evidence right now, when you pick up all the pieces, when the Vice President of the United States goes to the Munich Security Conference and criticizes Europe rather than actually coming out with any detail of a peace plan, then we know that we're in trouble. That transatlantic relationship
but he wasn't wrong to criticize
fundamentally
Europe, was he?
Changing.
But he wasn't wrong to criticize Europe because Europe has jumped and when they said jump, right? Europe has now decided they suddenly want a peace deal, which before J.D. Vance went anywhere near the Munich conference, they weren't even talking about. So suddenly, the Europeans are now trying to catch up, effectively. They've all admitted that he was right to say that they haven't spent enough money on defence. They've all admitted that Trump was right to say that. So at the end of the day, we're in a situation where Europe collectively has failed to protect Europe and has failed to protect its own defences. So therefore, now they want to spend more money. Now they're coming to us to say we should do it. But let me ask you this. Presumably you can't do a peace deal without talking to Putin. And without talking to Putin, there will be no peace deal. And so without bringing him to the table, which sometimes involves, as Piers Morgan said yesterday on Laura Kunsberg's show, you know, doing and making promises to Putin which might sound unpalatable right now, but unless you get him to the table, you're never going to get any kind of deal anyway.
Well, that might be the case. And then, as I say, I make it very, very clear the consequences of that. That if you allow Russia to claim any form of victory in Ukraine, if you don't stand up to Russia, Russia will do this all over again. How many times have I repeated this? 1938. What Donald Trump is doing is appeasing Russia. He's actually...
Well, you don't know that, though.
Well, he's parroting the very lines that Russia is actually using. And again, if America was absolutely committed to European security, it wouldn't be saying, here's the deal, but by the way, I'm not having anything to do with it, and no longer can NATO have anything to do with this peacekeeping either. You're right. There's been a failure of NATO. NATO, before those troops wandered in back in 2020, should have slid some assets, some NATO assets across into Ukraine, looked Putin in the eye, and that would have prevented all this from happening. But we blinked, and we've lost that Cold War statecraft capability of looking our enemy in the eye.
Well,
but America turning up, writing the deal, and then saying, fine, this is the deal that I've signed with Putin. By the way, I'm now out of here unless I get some minerals. That isn't leadership. That's leading.
Well, that's not what happened, actually, because until the deal is done, until the deal is done, Tobias, you don't know what the deal is. You know, 2 weeks before this.
That is the current state of affairs.
No, well, the current state of affairs. All right. Well, the current state of affairs, Tobias, when Zelensky was not in the meeting in Saudi Arabia, was that he was being rowed out of the deal, that nobody was talking to him. Suddenly, the following week, that narrative changed. The narrative changes about every 3 or 4 days right now. And at the moment, Keir Starmer's now saying that we are committed to supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. How long is that?
Well, go back to that Saudi Arabia. Why would you actually have a sit down with your arch enemy and start to agree those terms that your arch enemy is then pushing forward without consultation with the very people that you're supposed to be trying to help, or indeed your allies that should be there? This happened once before.
There was consultation.
It happened once before. No, he wasn't.
Yes, there was.
Zelensky. Well, the Prime Minister made it clear that he wasn't involved. Britain wasn't involved in Saudi Arabia, and neither was
No, Britain
Zelensky.
wasn't involved. Why would Britain be involved in that?
Because we're part of a senior leader in NATO, and we're the ones, as
well,
Donald Trump
not according to many commentators whose view I would value. Con Coughlin, for example, covered many wars as a military expert. You probably know him. He works for the Daily Telegraph. He basically said this whole summit was an exercise in wishful thinking, which is entirely correct, isn't it?
No, I don't agree with that. We've just seen increase in defence spending here. We've seen the framework for what a real deal might look like, and if that deal doesn't work, then absolutely.
What's the framework?
I want to go back to that.
I want to hear what the framework is, because I haven't got a lot of time left. What's the framework for the deal then that you think the Europeans have got?
Well, firstly, it's the fact that we're going to send in a coalition of the willing. We can't use NATO.
What does that mean?
Because America, well, as it says on the tin, it's those countries that are willing to move forward. There's, I think, about over 27 nations that were represented yesterday. Many of them will then go back and consult, and some of the bigger countries will step forward. The Baltic states will do that. Poland will do that.
Well, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania weren't even there.
Sorry, they've already committed, as is
but
Poland.
They weren't at the summit, Tobias.
You're asking... OK, you're trying to pick holes in every sentence I say.
No, I'm not trying to pick holes. I'm trying to give you the facts, right? You don't like what happened in Washington. You know, you can't pretend that you can't pretend that everything was rosy in London, because it wasn't. If you don't invite the 3 main countries that are on the border who face the most danger from Russia, then what's going on?
Because the point I'm trying to say and take away from this is that they're already signed up. They're already signed up to be part of that coalition of the willing. They were even before anybody else was.
Well, so you don't have to have them at the meeting then? Well, that's mad.
I'm sorry?
That's mad. That's a ridiculous excuse. Why weren't they there?
I didn't organise the meeting. I probably would have invited them. Maybe because they'd signed up already, that they weren't then required. or maybe I
so
don't
it
know.
was just a picture. So it was just, shouldn't they have been there for the picture at least? I mean, it's all very performative. It seems to me. We've found nothing out from Keir Starmer. He talks about a plan. He doesn't have one. He talks about a coalition of the willing. He doesn't tell us who. He talks about solving the problem in Ukraine without talking to Russia. Effectively, he's doing exactly what you accused Donald Trump of doing, because he's only talking to Zelensky. Why is he not talking to Putin?
I think you personally have decided what you want to take for that meeting, and I really can't get in the word in edgeways.
Well, all right. What's the difference? Well, tell me what the difference is between the Americans talking to the Russians only and the Europeans talking to the Ukrainians only. What's the difference?
Well, because you're getting the view of the very people that we've been trying to support for the last 3 years, and you're not doing a deal with a dictator.
He's doing a deal. Well, he's doing a deal with Ukraine, though, without talking to Russia. Surely that's the same as what you're accusing the Americans of.
Because we went in there to support Ukraine, and if we can't have a framework that actually guarantees in the long term Ukrainian security, it will impact on Britain and the rest of Europe, because there will be a wider European war.
Yeah, and you can't do that without America, can you?
It's better to do so, but I don't agree
you can't do it without America. Starmer says you can't do it without America.
I don't agree with that, and that is the wake-up call that we need to ask ourselves as to whether we actually have the political courage to use our military assets to push Russia back, or is it 1938 all over again, and we appease? And that's where Donald Trump, and I know that you don't want to speak ill of him, but I'm afraid
I would speak ill of Donald Trump if I wish to, but I just find it astonishing that all the people that do speak ill of him don't actually have a plan. But Tobias, we've got to go. Thanks very much indeed. Tobias Elwood, former Defence Select Committee Chair, says I don't let him get a word in edgewise. Well, maybe we should shorten his sentences a bit. Sam's got a voice note for us.
Morning, Mike. Great show. Foreign aid budget. You know what? As taxpayers, we're a bit like shareholders, aren't we? So shouldn't we, in an online poll, decide where and if the foreign aid goes? Yeah? Give us a list of where they intend to send it, or where they'd like to send it and how much, and let the taxpayers decide.
Very good idea, Sam. I think you're absolutely right. We shouldn't be sending foreign aid under the circumstances we currently are under, which is because we haven't got the money. But they keep finding it. Rachel pulls the old checkbook out, and they all clap when she signs our money away. It's quite extraordinary. Absolutely unbelievable. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Coming up, we'll speak to Ralph Schulhammer, researcher of political theory and international relations. I'm sure he might have something very interesting to say about this European summit.
in times of great conflict and strife. It's Britain and America that stand tall in the world and seek to find solutions to some of these enduring challenges that we're now seeing. But I think when it comes to Ukraine, Peter, let's not forget this is an illegal conflict in Ukraine. Yes, we want to see a sustainable end to all of this, a just and lasting resolution, but it is for the people of Ukraine as a sovereign country to be in control of that and to decide their own future.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Janice in Perthshire says, morning, Mike. You and Tobias Elwood, a couple of blokes having a spat. Are you J.D. Vance and Zelensky in disguise? Well, of course, you know, robust conversation is what we do here at the Home of Common Sense, and I would hope that many people who come onto the show would understand that. Nicola from Norfolk says, morning, Mike. Well done on your handling of Tobias Elwood. His interpretation of what the US has done is like many others with Trump derangement syndrome, very selective. Let's not forget this is the man who waxed lyrical about how great things were in Afghanistan under the Taliban. Of course, yes, I'd forgotten about that. Yes, that didn't go down too well for him, did it? Great show received... oh, no, sorry, done that one. How many cells have they got? This is from Helen on the subject of farmers. Thousands of tractors and farmers should attend and call the police's bluff. Surely they cannot arrest and lock up several thousand. Well, I don't think they can. We shall see. Let's talk to Ralph Schulhammer, though, researcher, political theory and international relations, of course, because he's a voice that we need on this subject. We've got all manner of people spouting off. We've got European summits going off right, left and centre. We've got Keir Starmer talking about standing with Ukraine and for as long as it takes. Well, how long is as long as it takes? He talks about being at a crossroads of history. He's full of all this sort of Blairist, Peter Mandelson-style slogans. But really, what is going on? Ralph, a very good morning to you.
Hey, Mike. Great to be back on with you.
Good to see you, yeah. I mean, this is all very performative. You know, basically we've got the commentators here, Con Coughlin, saying that this was a summit about wishful thinking. There's nothing really that Europe can do. They don't seem to have a plan. They can stand around and have lots of nice pictures taken, and Starmer can hug everybody and make himself out to be the great saviour of the Western world. But what exactly are they going to actually do?
Well, listen, those summits are a little bit like social media posting, just with better catering. So the actual effect is going to be very limited. And I think what we have to do in this entire conversation is we have to distinguish between what is morally desirable and what is economically and politically feasible. And I say this all the time. If you would ask me what I want from a moral perspective, would I like a return to the 2014 borders? The answer is yes. Do I think that under current conditions this is politically and economically feasible? The answer is no. And by the way, Great Britain historically, so I was a little bit shocked by your previous guest when he said we never do deals with dictators. I believe a certain Joseph Stalin would beg to differ. And in 1939, right, when the Soviet Union invaded Poland on September 17th, when the Soviet Union invaded Finland in 1940, Great Britain had a choice. They could have also declared war on the Soviet Union. They did not, because they understood you cannot fight a war at the same time against Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And we are in a similar situation where we say, are we capable economically to fight the prolonged war against Russia that is backed by China? This is just the reality we have to face. And then you have to make the trade-off. If the answer is yes, what will it cost Britain? What will it cost Europe? What will it cost the United States? And if the answer is no, we have to look at what that costs us as well. This moral grandstanding, you win wars on the battlefield and not via tweet. And I think that people from Brussels to London have not fully grasped that concept by now.
That is what worries me, that all of this kind of, you know, these videos that are being made, they've got music put to them, you know, we're going to stand firm, we're going to stand tall, we're going to be strong abroad, and we're going to be secure at home. Well, most of the European nations who were in attendance at that can't even protect their own borders, never mind protect Ukraine's borders. So, you know, they're all talking absolutely out of the wrong end of their bodies, in my view.
Yeah, and you see this, the Prime Minister, I said this on a previous show, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg was tweeting that we are standing with Ukraine. I mean, what exactly is Luxembourg going to do?
Right.
I mean, cheap, tweeting comes cheap. Actually fighting a war comes with significant costs. And the other point is, which I think particularly European leaders don't understand, this is not just a matter of money, right? The European Central Bank, hypothetically, can print as much money as they want, but you don't need bills and coins at the front lines. You need ammunition, you need tanks, you need artillery shells. And this is something the European economy, including the British, cannot produce in sufficient numbers at the moment. Again, there's always this argument, I don't understand, the Russian economy is so much smaller than the European economy. That is true, but the Russian economy is geared towards war. Russia is a garrison state. This is a country that has been preparing or was ready for war for a very long time.
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit, I think the Russians themselves expected more from their campaign in Ukraine, so this was not necessarily a showing of the mighty, powerful Russian army. That being said, they're still strong enough that they can keep what they have conquered so far. And if you want to get this back, this is not as easy, I think, as many believe.
No, of course it's not. But this is the trouble, isn't it? Because, I read a lot of, very thoughtful pieces about what is really going on in Ukraine. And there's an awful lot of land that has already been taken by Russia. As you say, the pragmatic view is not to say to Russia, you're going to have to just leave all that. And it may well be that, some people think that that's untenable. But are we really going to start World War III because the Russians want Crimea? Because the Russians would say, well, we want Crimea because it belongs to us.
Well, the point I would make is, if you look at Russia and Ukraine, those are two countries that before the war started already had deathbed demographies. I think the fertility rate in Ukraine was 1.4 children per woman. So this was an ethnicity, the Ukrainians were people that were already on the brink of disappearing.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is the main purpose? What should be the main goal of a president like Zelensky? And I would say his main goal should be that in 100, 120 years, there are still Ukrainians around. And I do not think that it's vital for Ukraine as a people to survive is not Crimea or the Donbass, but is to have an area, a territory that is secured where Ukrainians can prosper, have children, and continue Ukrainian history.
Yeah.
And I think, what kind of victory is it if you might, quote unquote, win the war, whatever that means, but you no longer have any Ukrainians left?
Right.
I think that's not my definition of a victory.
And also, there's no chance of any of these European nations, however they want to band them together, as Tobias Ellwood just said, to get any kind of peace deal or any kind of settlement without America.
No, that's a little bit the fun part that you hear. But you have all these meetings. You have Mr. Merz in Germany say, we now have to do our own thing. We no longer need the United States. And then 2-3 sentences down the speech, he says, but everything we do needs to be backstopped by the United States. I mean, one thing has been made absolutely clear by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, and this is something that I think American politicians always knew. They just never said it openly. Nothing in this world of significance is going forward, or almost nothing, without involvement of the United States. I know that many people don't like this. I know that many people think the United States are crass and vulgar and all these kind of things, and that might be true, but they are still the most powerful nation on the planet, and it's very difficult to do anything without their consent out there or without their involvement. By the way, even Americans hate this sometimes.
Right.
But this is not rah-rah America. This is just the situation as it is. If you are the most powerful country on the planet, you will always be dragged into things you'd rather not be dragged into. But once again, in international politics, the choices are not always between good and bad. Sometimes they are between bad and worse. And I think this is one of the situations we're currently facing.
Yeah, absolutely right. Great to speak to you again, Ralph. Good to see you. Must get you on some more. I'm sure we will do in the coming weeks. Ralph Schulhammer there, researcher in political theory and international relations. Get a voice note from Pete.
If Kienokio wants British troops on the ground and says we will back Ukraine up for as long as it takes, when President Trump wants to try and stop this war, does that actually mean then that Keir Starmer will be treated as a war criminal afterwards for the huge loss of life that's going to be caused due to carrying on this war when it could be stopped?
Well, it's a very good point. Let's talk to Chris, who's in Epsom. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Mike. Good morning, mate.
Morning, sir. What can I do for you?
Difficult times that we live in, difficult choices.
Yes.
I think I enjoy listening to Ralph. It always makes great sense.
Yeah.
You with Tobias earlier, both of you have got it right in certain areas. There is nobody wants war, but Europe has failed for the last 30, maybe 40 years to take into account the threat of Russia and allowed NATO to push eastwards after saying they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And we've now reached that impasse. And
which was inevitable, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And the trouble is with Starmer promising to do what we need to do to support Ukraine, which I support, he needs to take off his globalist human rights head and put on his PM's head. And because we are now de facto at a war footing.
We are.
And we need to save that blast furnace. We need to stop dismantling our power generation, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Net zero needs to go on the back burner.
Yeah.
The Chagos Islands need to stay ours.
Yeah.
We need to immediately increase, because Putin's going to lick his wounds. He didn't expect it to last 3 years. He thought 3 weeks was it.
But the point, as Ralph said, though, very well, is that Russia is a country that is used to being on a war footing and has been on a war footing for more than the last 3 years and is more than capable of doing it for the next 10 years. We're not, and we don't know how to do it.
We do know how to do it, Mike.
Not anymore.
Listen,
we got a guy in Downing Street who doesn't know what a woman is.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Look,
the army has become woke. We talked about it last week.
Yeah, listen, I'm a vet. I understand. I saw the demise of our forces and I left in '85.
Exactly.
Now, my training from '79 to '85 was all against a Russian invasion into Europe.
Yeah.
All right. Now that's been forgotten it's just not been done. What we need to do now is we need to look at America, how they recruit, because their recruitment's gone up 15% since Trump came to power. We need to offer free university places if young people sign up for the military. We need to have some pride. We need to give back the tax benefit. Should we put boots on the ground and you give the ultimate sacrifice, you want to know your family's going to be looked after.
Yeah, that doesn't happen either.
Yeah, over the next 5 years, we need to up the amount of armed forces, the actual men and women that are going to do the fighting. We need to be able to produce our own armaments and munitions.
Yeah, which we've also stopped doing.
Yeah, because Tobias is right in one way. This has real parallels with 1938, Sudetenland. You know, my first boss was a Jew who managed to escape Sudetenland, and his family were crucified out there. Now, you know, we don't want any creep, and if we don't want any more Russian creep into Europe, we need to show that we are meaningful in what we do. This net zero nonsense, that needs to go on the back foot. We need that money to go into defence. We need to build our defence capabilities in our own country.
Yes,
in our own
and isn't it funny, though, does it not strike you as rather odd, though, Chris, that this conversation was not even being had by Starmer 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, no, it doesn't strike me as odd, because, listen, the world has pivoted. The whole world has pivoted, and that now he needs to be able to back up what he's put into words. And we need to scrap the inheritance tax on farmers. We need to make sure that we can feed our nation, because if it does go wrong, if it does all go wrong and Russia starts creeping into Europe, you know, he may go into Moldova next, which he's already got unregistered troops in. They've already called for a separate nation, which is what they did in the Donbass. You know, this is not going to be over in 5 minutes.
No, of course it's not. Absolutely right. Listen, Chris, great call. Please call us again. We've got to run for the moment because we're running slightly late already. Because coming up, we're going to talk to Nigel Harris. There's lots of other stories going on, and this is the main one, obviously, the main event. But rail fares went up today as well. Here's another thing. You know, people in this country are sick to death of paying through the nose for everything. Prices going up through the roof. We've got the price cap on energy going up in April. We've got rail fares going up. We've got petrol prices going up. We've got fuel tax going up. And we've got everything going up. And all you've got is old tin soldier, you know, the tin man, Keir Starmer, banging on about how he thinks he's going to save the world. Well, he's not, because he can't even save Britain. In fact, he's driving it right off a cliff, the plank. It's 7:38.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:41. I'm Mike Graham. Here's one from Alan in Merseyside. Critics complain that America and Russia are wrong to meet without the main man Zelensky being there. Yeah, a quite happy Starmer in Europe can meet without the main man Trump. Well, this is the thing. You know, I said that to Tobias Elwood. How is it different if you get an arrangement that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State for the United States of America, meets with Sergei Lavrov, who I will say quite readily now, for anyone who wants to know what I think about Russia, is a pretty odious individual, is a pretty odious character and an untrustworthy one. But he represents Russia. He's the foreign minister of Russia. That meeting took place in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. You know, those who are against the Trump plan will say, oh, well, then you can't have a meeting with him without Zelensky. But except, you know, it's all right for Trump to have a meeting with Zelensky without any Russians present. Or it's OK for European leaders to have meetings with Zelensky without any Russians present. So what's the difference? I don't say one is better than the other. I just say, what's the difference? That's for me to make a decision on. And then Tony says, two-tier Kia will raise taxes to fund Ukraine and cut public services too. Oh, dear. Of course he will. Let's talk, though, about something slightly different. We'll take a little detour away from the warring populations of this nation and the warring populations of Europe and the rest of the world. Let's talk to Nigel Harris, co-founder and co-presenter of the weekly Green Signals Railway podcast. Nigel, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mike. It's a pleasure. I was just listening to your previous link, and isn't odious such a good word?
I like that word a lot, yes. It's particularly apt in his case as well. Rail fares rise by 4.6% in England and Wales. I read a piece at the weekend about how so many weekend trains, even though there's no strikes going on, are so unreliable, you know, and such a percentage of trains doesn't that you expect to run don't actually run. How can they justify this rail fares rise?
Well, of course, they can't. But what you've got now is a situation with the renationalisation of the railway that it is transparently entirely down to government decision as to what rail fares are. Of course, the reality is it has been for many years. 20 years I've been doing media interviews on days like this where, you know, sore commuters are railing, no pun intended, against the rail companies. Yes. But quietly, the DfT sat in the background, and it's them that set certainly the commuter and the regulated fares. I think the procedure is that the inflation rate in July the previous year sets the rail fare increase for the following year.
Right.
And occasionally the government has shaved a percentage point off what it should be and hoped that we'd all see this as a great boon. But the fares have relentlessly gone up every year. Interestingly, at the same time, I think since 2011 or 2012, is it, the duty on petrol and diesel fuel has not gone up at all. Right. So we're cranking up the cost of public transport on the railways, which we say we want people to use more, whilst, you know, favouring road transport. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't. And I know that people will just say, I must be some kind of idiot. But whenever I've tried to book a ticket on a train, it's remarkably complex. It's more ridiculously complicated than anything else I've ever done. You know, I've booked tickets on planes, I've booked hotel rooms, I've booked all manner of things. But trying to book a train ticket, it's almost like you need to have somebody advising you on sort of four-dimensional chess or something.
It's a bit Vulcan, isn't it? It's a bit Mr. Spock in that respect. Yes, it is, and that is one of the aspirations from the railways bill going through at the moment is to try and simplify that. Yeah. But just let me sound a word of caution there. If you simplify fares, at the minute it is complicated, but you've got this huge spread of fares, so there's one where you want it. If you simplify the range of fares, you tend to get increases. So, you know, simplification is a bit of a double-edged sword. If you're prepared to spend a bit of time on it, and of course whether you should need to do this is another thing, but third-party ticket retailers like Trainline, there are some really good bargains, but you have to dig around.
Oh, there are, yeah, no, but you can never find them until after you've already bought your ticket, unfortunately.
To find them, and it's not right, you know. It ought to be simple to buy a ticket, and it ought to be then simple to get on your train.
Yeah.
And it just isn't. You're absolutely right. Now, I've spent 28 years from 1995 editing the leading rail title, and pushed and pushed and pushed, and I saw no progress at all on this. There's two big problems which journalists need to be aware of. One is the Treasury is paranoid about the law of unintended consequences, that if it makes changes, the overall revenues will go down.
Right.
Politicians who only see 5-year timelines are worried that if you create winners, you create losers, and they vote, so they don't want to see a change either. Now, those are two huge steps to get past.
Right. But we're now in the midst, I believe we are anyway, although I haven't really noticed any difference, in the renationalisation of the trains. I mean, the Great British Railways, or whatever they're going to call it. Rather a misnomer, it seems to me, so far. But, I mean, is that making any difference, or will it make a difference?
Well, these things always take time, don't they? The legislation for Great British Railways is just being consulted on at the minute, so it's going to take a while for that to all go through.
Right.
But certainly, if you've got one directing mind who can say, right, you do that, and you go away, then you'll get away with and get rid of an awful lot of the inbuilt conflict in the system, which has stopped progress for so long. So they have to get that right and get somebody in charge who can be a fat controller, if you like, at the core of it all. And especially this accounts when things go wrong. Because when things go wrong at the minute, there's too many individual companies all worrying about their own position rather than somebody in charge saying, let's do that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And this whole idea of rolling stock being different from the railway lines and the stations and the transportation, different their companies, you know, it's all a big mess, it seems to me. But listen, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, don't forget, that's how aviation works. No airline, I think, owns its own aircraft. They tend to be leased.
Yes.
So that in itself isn't a problem. And of course it means you don't have the vast cost of developing and buying new ones. So if it's properly managed, that is not a bad thing in itself.
No, true. But not many airline companies are making much money either, but that's another story. But we'll come back to you, I'm sure, again, Nigel. Thanks a lot. Very good to talk to you. Appreciate it very much this early in the morning. Let's get a voice note from Alan in Ukraine.
Morning, Mike. Alan from Swansea. Why do you keep having that clown on every time? He just talks absolutely waffle. This is what we should be doing. Putin will doing this. Was he a clairvoyant or something? He knows what's going to happen. Keeps referring to 1938. We had to stop it like Hitler expansion. Putin just wants peace. Zelensky, remember he was the same. If you don't stop him now, you'll be next. They're all clairvoyants. They know what's going to happen. End of the day, Trump's in. Get on the table, have peace. End of. And that's what Starmer sending out troops to Ukraine? Absolutely not. I'm ex-army 10 years. Would I go down there? Absolutely not. For that idiot, you must be joking. Trump will sort the world out. Thank God for that. End of.
Alan on Ukraine rather than in Ukraine there, sorry, yeah, absolutely right. I think a lot of people would agree with Alan. You know, this is not the time to be threatening to send British troops to a foreign country. And the people who say, oh, but it's not a foreign country, it's all part of Europe. Well, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Because the Russians don't agree. And if the Russians say that they're not going to pull out, and if the Russians say that they're not going to have peacekeepers, and if the Russians say they're not going to give up any land, and if the Russians say they're not going to do a deal, then what do? You just have a full-scale war, and we all decide that we're going to have World War III? Seriously? 0344 499 1000. Coming up, another U-turn from Labour when they're at home. This is Angela Rayner, right? Once you have the right to switch off. I mean, she switches off quite regularly when she's working, never mind when she's not working. But apparently she wanted everyone to have the right to switch off when you weren't at work. So you didn't have to answer any emails or answer the phone or anything like that. Apparently, Jonathan Reynolds, the fake solicitor, he thinks that's a bad idea. So he thinks absolutely they're going to get rid of that from the bill. We'll find out what that means coming next.
whether it's in Gaza, whether it's on the doorstep of Europe in the Ukraine, President Trump wants the bloodshed to end, for the meat grinder to stop. And that was an opportunity today for the president from Kiev to be engaged in an end to the hostilities. But sadly, it seems not to be the case that he's on the side of peace.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. The sun is coming up. It's very misty out there today, but it is going to get warm apparently towards the end of this week, so fear not. You might be able to put the coat away for a while. Let's get a voice note from Liam about our borders.
Morning, Mike. Ian from Nottingham. Hope you're well. Love the show. A brilliant interview with Tobias. I see things through my own sunny spectacles, Elwood. Thing is, we've got war on our own borders and they do nothing about it, and all these European lovies do nothing. They just stand there for a photo opportunity. But that is symptomatic, really, isn't it, of what is going on here. We've got millions of people walking across, well, on boats and then walking across our border. What if they were Russians? They happen to be another race of people, or whoever they are. They may as well be. What would they do then? Would they actually take action? Because they do nothing. They do zero.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point, Liam, and this is a point I've been making all weekend, really, that it's all very well talking a good game and saying, it's all about security at home. Well, we don't have security at home. Try walking down the street in many of the cities of this country and see whether or not you think that you're not going to be a victim of crime. Try not being a victim of crime. We need to sort that out as well, surely. Let's talk to Kate Palmer, their HR director at Peninsula, which is, of course, a global employment law consultancy. Angela Rayner wants to bring in workers' rights, but unfortunately for her, some of those workers' rights are probably not going to last the length of the bill, shall we say. It certainly looks as though the right to be off when you're working, i.e. the right to downtime, the right to not have to answer an email or answer a phone when you're not technically working, is going to be probably stricken from the bill. Let's find out what Kate makes of that. Kate, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all. Thanks very much for talking to us. I mean, it looks as though the business of business is sort of being woken up to finally by the Labour government. Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, who used to not be a solicitor, and his good mate Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, have said they don't want this in the bill.
Yeah, correct. So this was one of many things in the manifesto, the right to disconnect, which is actually legislation in many countries around the world, Ireland being one of them. However, it's one thing that they're taking a U-turn on. They've said that this is going to be something that, albeit it weren't in the bill, it was going to be something they implemented out with of that, but implement nevertheless. They've said that this is something that's not going to progress and the right to disconnect will not be in place. So it's up to employers whether they want to choose and adopt that or not.
Right. Because they did it in France, I think, as well, didn't they? Didn't they make it impossible for somebody to get an email after 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon or something?
They did. France is just one of many countries. And, we work with so many clients at Peninsula that are, keeping their head above water, working every hour to make their business a success. And it just seems such... Well, a step too far, to be honest, Mike. The feasibility of not doing a little bit of work outside your contracted hours is just so difficult for many businesses that I definitely think this will be a welcome change.
Yeah, I think so. Because at the end of the day, like everything else in life, it's about common sense, isn't it? I mean, if you're a worker who's getting inundated with work every single weekend and you can't do anything other than just be glued to your computer, then obviously there's a problem. But, you know, if you occasionally get an email to answer or if somebody wants to phone you up because they need to ask you a question at something about something quite important, particularly if you're relatively senior and you're getting well paid, then surely that should be something they can do.
Yeah, I mean, balance is the key for me in business. You know, we've already got the working time regulations that were introduced in 1998 that set parameters around breaks and so forth. But, you know, I work in business. I don't start till 8:30. I wouldn't be here on this session today with yourself, Mike. You know, there's so many businesses that need the common sense approach. Balance, and of course one's mental health, the duty of care to one is important. As you say, if you're inundated, that's a step too far, but most people I know in most businesses are doing something outward of their contracted hours to ensure that the business is moving forward. So again, it's common sense, balance, and that legislation or that statutory code, as it's going to be, just feels a step too far.
It does. I remember Keir Starmer doing an interview with Chris Evans in this very building, saying that on a Friday at 6 o'clock he stops working and he spends that evening with his family and refuses to do any work. I'm pretty sure he's found out that that was a pointless thing to say, because I think he's been working non-stop ever since. But, you know, I mean, how does he think he can get away with it if he wants to impose it on everybody else?
Yeah, no, I actually remember that myself, to be honest, because I thought, you know, it feeds into that whole work-life balance issue, which, look, is really prevalent, particularly since COVID, and I get it. You've got to have a work-life balance, but likewise, businesses have got to strive to success. Now, it doesn't mean they don't introduce their own policy that's sensible for their business around a right to disconnect. But as I say, I think it'll be very much welcome that they don't have to introduce a statutory code, because one size does definitely not fit all in this scenario.
No, totally right. Kate, good to talk to you, and thank you for working outside of your normal hours. I really appreciate it. Maybe you get an extra half an hour off at the end of the week. HR Director at Peninsula Global Employment Law Consultancy. How about this from Mike in Sussex, who says, Mike, I think Keir's newly found Save of the World role is pure diversionary tactics designed to stop us talking about him and his failure of government here in the UK. Over the weekend, there were no articles on his many failures, lying Labour MPs, net zero failures, etc. He is a disgrace. And Steve says, because Zelensky has been championed by the woke, everyone has to kneel at the altar of Saint Zelensky. To even remotely question him is forbidden. Watch now how the left-wing media machine roars into action. Starmer will now be championed as a great Prime Minister, and they can now get back to calling Trump Hitler and demonising him. Well, this is the thing. I mean, they were so happy that there was a row. I mean, what nobody seems to be very keen to point out is that there was a big row as well between Joe Biden and Volodymyr Zelensky, but nobody really wants to talk about that or remember that, because it's that horrible man Trump that's been so ghastly and ruined diplomacy by having an actual argument in front of the cameras. Well, we're going to speak to Harry Cole from The Sun coming up a bit later on, and he's got a slightly different take on all of that, and we will bring that to you, of course, as well. Richard Tice coming up after the news. From Reform, the Deputy Leader will find out what he's got to say about Chagos.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Farmer, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8 and the sun is up. The world is upon us. It's the first Monday of March, ladies and gentlemen. My goodness me, what a weekend. It's been quite eventful. It's been quite extraordinary. Richard Tyson's joined me this morning. Richard, very good to see you.
Very good morning. It is glorious to see the sun up.
Isn't it?
It's pretty cold in central London, but it sort of feels a little bit brighter.
Yes, it does.
Even if the world of politics is a bit frosty.
It does feel as though we're teetering a bit on the edge. But don't worry, because Keir Starmer's got a plan. Actually, no, he hasn't got a plan. He just wants to have a plan. He had a big meeting with a load of leaders yesterday, hugged a lot of people, and he gave them all, I think, a goodie bag to go away with. I think he thought it was the Oscars. I mean, it was a similar day, wasn't it? You know, you turn up, you pretend to do something that you're not really doing, you say hello to a load of people you don't really like, and then you get away with a goodie bag. I wonder what was in it. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Ursula von der Leyen was there. She says we need to stand tall and tough and be strong in Europe. When she was Defence Minister of the German country, they ran out of guns and bullets, and they were given wooden broom handles to fight with. That's right, that's the calibre of people. We've got old, what's his name, Trudeau there. He doesn't really know what a woman is. In fact, if you say what a woman is, he gets offended. And there he is talking to Zelensky, who I'm pretty sure he thinks is a war hero. I mean, the whole thing is just gone completely and utterly mad, has it not? 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll talk about Chagos Islands as well, because that seems to have fallen way down the agenda, but it could be as early as this week that it all gets given away. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Richard Tyson's here, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. I mean, I don't know where to start, really, Richard. I mean, it's been quite an extraordinary
Well, it has
weekend.
been quite an extraordinary few days since your last show on Friday, with the scenes in the White House.
Yeah.
And, look, I mean, I think they made everybody feel uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, whether people like it or not, you know, President Trump was elected on a mandate to try and secure a peace, and he's been speaking to people from both sides of this horror and trying to look at all the different sort of things that are on the table. And the reality is that most wars end in some form of negotiation. Those negotiations will be difficult, tense, and as we saw on Friday, those difficult discussions are best held behind closed doors. And it's quite common for voices to be raised and for things to get really difficult. That's the nature of compromise, however hard it is.
As Ralph Schulhammer said to us, you know, when Therese Elwood said, oh, we don't do business with dictators, we don't negotiate with them, well, he said, unfortunately, he forgot about Stalin, because at the end of World War II, you know, basically Europe was carved up in a way which perhaps now wouldn't be done. But it was done.
Look, at the end of the day, I think the vast, vast majority of sane, rational people want to see, is it possible to get to a durable peace? That can only work if you've got robust security guarantees. That's, in a sense, the focus of all the energy, and it's right to do that. And sure, you've got all this sort of glad-handing yesterday, the meeting of European leaders plus a few others.
Yeah, who, by the way, 3 weeks ago weren't talking about a peace deal in Ukraine, but suddenly are now.
Well, I'm actually pleased that Keir Starmer has clearly now read and learnt from the Reform UK contracts last July, because we were the only party at the general election that said we needed to have GDP on defence spending of 2.5% in 3 years, 3% in 6 years. He's now completely mirrored that. The Tories are now sort of essentially copying us as well. So once again, we've led the way. They're catching up. The only way to get peace is through strength, and that's what we've always understood.
But Europe can't do any of that without America, and even Keir Starmer sort of acknowledged that.
Because Europe for 2 or 3 decades has been riding on the coattails of the US, not paying its bills, it's ended up completely reliant on America. Now, look, the reality is that the best way to defend ourselves is through NATO. We don't want a separate European vehicle.
Right.
We've got to focus totally on NATO, properly fund NATO, properly organise everything through NATO, and ensure that the critical element of that, the US...
So would you give more money to NATO then?
Well, ultimately, we've all got to spend more on defence. And that's why we said it in our election contract last July, up to 3% within 6 years. And we showed how you pay for it. And we've got to do that, because otherwise you end up in this terrible situation where essentially enemies, opponents, they don't feel deterred. And the thing is about all of this is that the US is also focusing on its other challenges. It's not just Ukraine. You've got China, you've got North Korea, you've got Iran.
Yeah.
So there are many other
They've also got a bit of a
geopolitical
problem
challenges.
on the southwestern border as well, which I know is about immigration more than it is about defence. But it's such a big problem that it's also a kind of defence problem, isn't it?
It is ultimately, because it's all about defending your own borders.
Right.
And we all want peace. We've got to try, however hard it is, you've got to keep trying.
Yeah.
But you'll only get a proper peace with robust security guarantees. What I've been saying, put everything on the table, including there's not enough discussion about the $300 billion of frozen Russian assets in Western central banks. People are beginning to talk about it. They've been using the interest on it. Forget that. In my view, and the view of people like Sibylle Browder, use the lot, because actually that's
why
what,
are we not using
hurts.
it for other things?
Well, we should be using it to pay for the defence of Ukraine, to look at pay for some of the rebuilding of Ukraine,
which is
possibly
what
to repay some of the costs.
But that's what Starmer and Reeves said they were doing on Saturday. The 2.26 billion they reckon
that's only the interest
is coming from the interest. Yeah,
but that's just the interest. Forget. We should be using all of it, and that would really hit Putin in the pocket. And that's the sort of thing where we've got to be prepared to say this is how you can fund a proper security guarantee in Ukraine to deter Putin from ever doing this again.
But it's a bit more complicated than that, because I was reading the actual government report on this loaned money, and the money would appear to not actually be in the hands of the government at the moment. They have to go and find it. They have to go and get it. You know, they say that they've got this interest coming in, but it's not clear how it's coming in, because it's a G7 sort of organised collection of money, if you like. So it's not solely owned, if you like, by the British government.
No, it's not. These are frozen Russian assets, but they are in Western banks.
Yes, but they're not frozen. What I mean by that is they're not frozen by this government. Which means that this government cannot necessarily release them.
Correct, which is why you've got to get all of the Western leaders to agree to it, which is why I'm saying, why aren't they agreeing it? Why are they being so reluctant?
Yes.
Because that is a huge amount of money from which you can build the security guarantees, which is why I've been saying you've got to have everything on the table.
Right, let's have a listen to what Keir Starmer said, I think this was on Saturday, about putting boots on the ground.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing.
So he wants strong US backing. I don't know what planes he's going to put in the air or what boots he's going to put on the ground.
Well, this is
rather profligate with our armed forces, isn't
This is the harsh reality, is that Ukraine's got way more boots on the ground than we have, for example, and I think it's about the quality of the equipment and the guarantee and the technology to protect Ukraine. I don't actually think it's about other nations' boots on the ground. So, but all of this is in the mix.
Also,
but
what
Keir Starmer there has to accept is that ultimately we are obviously reliant on the US because people haven't funded their defence forces here in Europe. And isn't it interesting? Keir Starmer is essentially acting as a sort of liaison link point between Europe and the US, thanks to Brexit.
Yes.
Because of Brexit Britain, he is now able to be independent and to stand there and act as a sort of bridgehead, whilst he's trying to negotiate a free trade deal with the US, thanks to Brexit.
Yes, and he says, of course, that what he's attempting to do with these European leaders is to come up with a peace plan, which he will then present to President Trump to see whether Trump likes it or not.
And one of the reasons that he can do that is because President Trump loves the United Kingdom and he loves Brexit.
I think he might love it slightly less today than he did on Thursday.
Actually, no, I don't agree with that. And I think that, in a sense, it's because we've left the EU that he's got so much more confidence in our ability. And, I think the efforts that Nigel has done over many years is definitely paying off. And I think that's a great thing. And as of all of this nonsense seen in the Mail and various people saying that we've got to withdraw the state visit, absolute garbage.
Yeah.
As juvenile stupidity, we should be doubling down.
But wasn't that a bit of a ridiculous move, though, as well?
What we should be doing is, at the end of the day, the British monarchy is probably the most loved around the world. It's our greatest piece of soft power, and we should be using it as much as we can. And the President Trump had a huge affection for the late Queen, loves the British royal family, and so we should be using that. These people sort of short-term headlines, cancel the state visit. It's pathetic. It's juvenile.
It's particularly pathetic getting their knickers in a twist about, people shouting at one another. Zelensky doesn't care. He's already said he's going to rebuild whatever the relations he needs to have with the Americans. I mean, he's a man that's been involved in a war for 3 years. I don't think getting shouted at by Donald Trump a little bit is going to bother him.
And actually, do you know...
And also, by the way, he was shouted at by Joe Biden as well.
And I'm not going to criticise the leaders who are trying to secure peace. It's really difficult. They've got huge tensions, massive pressure on them.
Yeah.
Obviously, President Zelensky, huge pressures on him, all just relentless decisions and challenges, and his own people dying every day.
Yeah.
Huge pressures on President Trump, believe it or not, because he told his electorate that he would secure a peace in Ukraine. So all these leaders have got pressure.
Well, he said he would do it in 24 hours as well. Which,
well,
of course,
he's always
rhetorical, wasn't it?
He's always bullish.
Yeah.
And but the ambition to get peace, we should all surely get behind.
And
with peace, whether some people like it or not, there will have to be compromises made.
It's impossible not to have compromises because the Russians are not going to stop. As we were saying earlier, they're a war country. They are built around wars. They can run wars because they don't. It's not really a democracy, so they can actually do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if it becomes a stalemate, this idea that we back Ukraine for as long as it takes. Well, most people that I speak to in this country don't want that. They don't want hundreds of billions of pounds going over to Ukraine, taxpayers' money. They don't want it to happen.
And I think it's very interesting, we just sort of look back a little bit in history. Back in 2008, at the Bucharest NATO conference, America was saying we should let Ukraine into NATO.
Yeah.
And that was rejected by Germany and France.
Yeah.
And the Brits didn't even bother to show up to the meeting.
Yeah.
Just think. You think about these big decisions.
Yeah.
If that had happened back then, 4 or 5 years after that, then Russia wouldn't have been able to go into Crimea or the eastern Ukraine, and we wouldn't be where we are. So, these long-term strategic decisions are very important, and we have to acknowledge mistakes have been made in the past.
Well, Chris Parry, who comes on this show very, very often, and very often on this station, former NATO commander, said he was raising the issue of Russia as a problem in 2008 to the then Labour government, and they shut him down and said, we don't want you talking about that. He wasn't allowed, and he was, in fact, his job at the time was to predict the future.
That's right.
For the Ministry of Defence.
That's right.
And he was told to shut up and not mention that at all because he thought that'd be a bad thing. The other thing he mentioned, by the way, was immigration. Funnily enough.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Chagos Islands, because we've got a little clip here for you. This is Starmer on the Chagos deal with Trump.
Keir Starmer has signed the deal to give away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Will you approve that deal?
Well, we're going to have some discussions about that very soon, and I have a feeling it's going to work out very well. They're talking about a very long-term, powerful lease, a very strong lease. about 140 years, actually. That's a long time. And I think we'll be inclined to go along with your country. Yeah, I think it's sounded. It's a little bit early. We have to be given the details, but it doesn't sound bad. Yeah, please.
Yes.
So the interesting point there was the last bit of that clip.
Yeah.
We haven't looked at the details yet.
Yeah.
And that's because, as we have said, they've got so many other, frankly, much bigger things on their plate. What I can reveal to you and your listeners is that we have it, Nigel has it, from very senior Republican sources, that there's been no discussion by the British government to the US administration about any form of payment. So from the Americans' point of view, they don't care. They currently occupy the base, right, at Diego Garcia.
And presumably they don't pay for that at the moment.
Which they're not paying for.
Right.
No one's asking them to pay any more. They're going to occupy it for the next, give or take, 100 years.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, that's the least of their problems. They're looking at the Brits and saying, if you stupid limeys are going to go and pay Mauritius tens of billions of pounds, that's your own stupidity. It's nothing to do with us, Gov.
But
so
don't
what
they
we're
realise that there's a security problem, though?
But there isn't a security problem because they occupy the base, they have done, and they will continue to do so. So from their perspective, it's not a problem. This deal is the worst deal in the history of mankind. And it is in breach of the original 1965 agreement between the UK and Mauritius, when Mauritius got independence. And do you know what? We paid them £3 million in old money back then to relinquish any claims they may or may not have. That's 75 million quid in today's money. So it's Mauritius who's in breach of the original agreement. What Reform UK are going to do, when we win the next general election, Mike, we're going to rip up any deal done by this Labour government as invalid and gross negligence. And we will stop all the payments, and we will make it very clear to Mauritius that they're the ones in breach of the original agreement, and if necessary...
You might have to go to war over something like that.
Look, forget that. Right. We're just going to make it clear it's invalid. We're not going to make the payments, and if that requires serious discussions about visas, about restrictions on direct flights, then so be it. We are not going to be ripped off by a bunch of Mauritians who are in breach of the original agreement. And we have the support, no question, of the vast, vast majority of the British people.
I'm sure that's true. Most of whom had never heard of the Chagos Islands until about 4 or 5 months ago. But what about the possibility that that then becomes an international law problem? Because you've then, you've got a government that's handed over control of a territory to another country, right? You can't just take it back, can you?
Well, the reality is the agreement would be invalid because it's the Mauritians who are in breach. They signed the 1965 agreement with the United Kingdom, relinquishing all claims. They were paid by us as part of that process. So they're the ones in breach. They were in breach in reactivating the discussion. And let's just remember, this ICJ ruling from 2018.
It's only advisory, isn't it?
It's an advisory ruling. So the whole thing is an outrage, and we will stop it. If no one else will, we will stop it.
I mean, it'd be better if you could stop it before it goes ahead.
Of course, because we shouldn't start any payments. I mean, if you compound, give or take 3% inflation, which is what we understand the deal to be, the 90 million a year payments over the life of the whole lease, you talk about 50 billion quid plus or minus. I mean, the whole thing's absolutely ludicrous, and we've got to stand up and say this is not tolerable. It's just simply unacceptable. The British people will not stand for it.
And Nigel, I remember, seemed to say some weeks ago, or when you were first in Parliament, I suppose, that the Chagos Islands deal was in some jeopardy because, in fact, he had spoken to some highly sort of connected members of the Republican Party in the White House who said they weren't going to go for it.
Yeah, that's
so maybe there's a chance that he still won't go for it.
And I think, as you heard President Trump, that they've just got a huge amount on their plate, and as I say, this doesn't reach the top of the pile. If they looked at the details in detail, they'd say, of course they'd say that, we do. I mean, why are you guys doing this? But in a sense, it is actually not their problem. It's our problem if we're foolish enough to have a government that wants to give away loads of our money that, by the way, we really haven't got.
Yes, absolutely right. And that's the main point. As they need more money for defence, and 18 billion we have not got to spare. It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. Richard, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Richard Tice there from Reform, Deputy Leader, of course. I mean, the Chagos Islands is a no-brainer, isn't it? You just don't do it. Don't give something to somebody and then pay them to take it away. It makes it completely insane. It's 21 minutes past 8. Let's get a voice note from Lisa.
Morning, Mike. It's Lisa from Canterbury. I cannot believe what this absolute muppet Starmer is doing. We have got so many problems in our country. The country is so broken. People are suffering. Homeless people on the streets that they can't deal with. Borders are open. People going around stabbing and killing each other. Schools always on high alert. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
It really is. Lisa, very well summed up. Thank you very much indeed. That's what the people of this country think. They don't want to go into war with the Russians. They don't want to keep arming Ukraine till the end of time. They don't want to sell the Chagos Islands. I mean, you know, what more do you need to be told, Starmer, before you come to heel? For heaven's sake. This is Talk.
Do you think that Trump can actually help bring peace to the world?
He's the only one who can. He did it before. Think about it. Crimea was invaded under Obama. Nothing for 4 years. Biden comes in. Afghanistan is surrendered. October the 7th, the greatest loss of Jewish life since the end of the Holocaust. And then we have, of course, the second invasion, the third invasion of Ukraine. So if it can be done, the only person can do it is President Trump.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brew will be here then. Coming up to 25 minutes past 8. Dorothy says, morning, Mike. I cannot believe Starmer is putting Britain into this position. Trump is correct. All we can look forward to is hundreds of thousands of more men and women dying. And Mark says this, looking at the gathering of EU plus Canadian leaders in London proves one thing to me. Trump is a cunning manipulator, the art of waking everyone up and focusing on peace and funding. How easily they fell into his trap. Well, I said this at the weekend. You know, he suggested that they come up with a peace deal to protect Europe, and suddenly they're doing one. Here's Darren.
Morning, Mike. Darren from Warsaw. The problem you got here, you got two tier 3 gears, pathetic little advisors, all straight out of university, going, oh, this is your Falklands moment, sir. Stand up. Be a world leader. Be like the Iron Lady. Be like Thatcher. And you got Gordon Brown in his ear going, yes, do you remember when I saved the global banking system? I saved the world. He actually said it in Parliament, didn't he? They said, oh, he didn't mean to say it was a Freudian slip. But that idiot really thinks he saved the world from the economic crash. And they're all going, yes, Keir, you can do it. You can be the global leader. You can save the world. And he's drinking it. He's thinking, yeah, I am. I'm massive important. I'm going to keep making statements. I'll send our non-existent army to do this. I'll send our non-existent army to do that because I'm so important. Forget what Trump says. Forget Putin. I'm so important. I am the global player. You thought Ed Miliband was dangerous. Hold my beer, says Keir Starmer. Keep it up, mate.
Absolutely, Darren, thank you very much indeed. And here's one from Stephen in Middlesbrough, Stephen Middlesbrough, I should say. He says, what do these people want? Full-scale nuclear war? If so, let's get on with it and get it over with. Putin cannot be beaten with sanctions and pumping billions into Ukraine. I start to worry slightly when people start messaging me saying, let's just get on with nuclear war. I mean, come on. You know, give yourself a slap. We don't want nuclear war. I really don't. You know, I intend to be around for a while. Nuclear war tends to put an end to all that. Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Mike.
Well, I mean, here we are again. The biggest number of illegal migrants have just come across the channel yesterday, 500 of them. It's apparently going to be quite nice this week, so we can probably expect another couple of thousand by this time next weekend, I suppose. Meanwhile, we've got, everybody's been sort of diverted by this Keir Starmer manoeuvre about Ukraine. But he talks about defending the country, but our own borders aren't protected. How's he going to protect theirs?
Well, it's always a kind of conundrum for most people who look at our own nation. When you see a leader like Keir Starmer saying that I will defend the borders of Ukraine by spending British taxpayers' money, maybe using the lives of British people to go and defend them in a potential war against Russia, when he won't even defend the borders of our own channel, when we have the powers to be able to do that, Mike, as we know, we've discussed it many, many times. He could use the Navy and the laws of the sea to return all those channel migrants to the French coast, but he won't. So it is a conundrum. It is one that leaves us always very surprised about why leaders say this, but I do not believe for 1 minute a lot of what Keir Starmer says when it comes to migration, or potentially on this case about Ukraine either.
I don't believe a lot of what he says about anything, really, to be honest. I mean, almost everything that he said he would do, he hasn't done. And almost everything he said that he wouldn't do, he has done. And there was no mention, I mean, even a month ago, there was no mention of doing any kind of peace deal in Ukraine. It's suddenly been cooked up ever since J.D. Vance went to Munich and Starmer went to the United States.
Absolutely. I think what we're facing here is an existential threat to the liberal elite order of Europe. The Macrons, the Keir Starmers, the Blairs, all those types of people that love the idea of the United Nations running everything, the ECHR controlling everything, the European Union being in power to be able to manipulate everything from our laws to the ability to take money from our people. And now they're seeing two individuals, in particular in J.D. Vance and Trump, but not also his team. The whole of his team are devoted to the idea of making America great again by defending American interests. And if that means upsetting the liberal elite, they don't care.
No.
So that's what we've got.
Exactly right. Meanwhile, back at home, I mean, foreign criminals, we are told, who are now in jails in this country are going to be booted out faster by a new immigration squad. It's a £5 million blitz, which these days doesn't sound like very much money. Apparently, they're going to say the Home Office is going to turf out people up to 18 months before their sentences end. Some of them are going to be sent to serve time back home. In my previous experience of these kind of deals, it usually involves paying people to go home, or it usually involves paying, as they did in Albania, foreign governments vast amounts of money to take them back.
Well, I think that's the case, Mike. We've got to look at this amount of money. 5 million is about less than 1 day's money that we're going to give to Zelensky.
Yeah, right.
We're defending their borders with 5 million, but can't defend our own.
Well, it wouldn't pay for all of the migrants in hotels either, would it?
No, not at all. And here is the case, is really, the reality is the prison population is about 12 to 13,000 people made up of foreign nationals who've committed crimes. We get rid roughly around 5,000 every year, but again, the same numbers seem to fill up our prisons every year. So even if we do decide to get this crack team, as they're calling it, to get them out, it'll be filled up because we're getting 40 to 50,000 people coming across on the boats. Our own security services and leading police officers admit that vast amounts of crime in this country are committed by foreign nationals, particularly Albanians at the moment. Yeah. So the more that we ship them out, the more that are coming back across to fill up the prisons.
Well, I mean, it gets better than that, because there's a story in one of the papers today about an Albanian crime boss who smuggled hundreds of migrants into Britain, sent back to Belgium to do a 10-year prison stint there. He's already sneaked back over here on another boat, so he's back in Britain.
Okay, well, Mike, I rarely get surprised by most stories, and that's one I actually hadn't heard of. I mean, I do find it rather amusing. He's managed to escape the Belgian prisons.
Yeah.
Been able to use his own contacts to get back into the UK. And why does he do that? Because he knows it's very difficult to get rid of him.
Exactly right. And also, we had this story last week. I mean, I don't know what's going on with the Belgian penal system, but some Albanians were apparently saying that they couldn't be sent to Belgium to spend time in their jails because the jail cells are too small.
I thought for a minute, can I just say it's the wrong type of frites or chips?
Yes. No. I can beat that today as well. Have you heard of it? I mean, it starts to sound like a sort of a stand-up comedy routine. Have you heard the one about the psychotic Nigerian? Right, this is a guy who apparently is an armed robber and a crack cocaine dealer. He's basically the subject of a deportation order that was made more than 10 years ago in April 2014. But he can't be sent home because he's possessed. I mean, he's managed to convince the Home Office and whichever human rights lawyer is representing him that he is in fact possessed by the devil, and therefore he can't be sent home because they don't treat people like that very well.
No, is anybody there? Is anybody there? There's no one there in the Home Office, is there, trying to get rid of them?
I know. Well, you should give him a Ouija board and send him on the next plane to Nigeria, you know.
They'll probably turn it around in midair and say, the devil has brought me back again.
It is, but it's pathetic, isn't it? I mean, there's literally a story a day like this now.
And we're a laughing stock. I mean, what must it feel like to be in the Home Office and the judicial system when you see this type of case? Because you know that this is going to bring ridicule upon you, your institution, and the people that you're working for. When you just can't get rid of individuals who are plainly within clear sight of you, deep criminals who should be gone. And so I'm sorry for a lot of people who work there, because I know they're decent individuals, many of them.
Yeah, but I mean, the system in and of itself is just absolutely and utterly hopeless. I mean, we had a call this morning from a guy who's down in Folkestone, so he actually was able to witness last night, you know, for first hand. You know, there was the search and rescue helicopter, the RNLI were out, the Border Force boats were all out, you know, helping these people, hundreds of them, to come on shore to a country which they're literally arriving on illegally. You know, we shouldn't be helping them. I'm sorry.
Well, I feel exactly the same way in the fact that so many people in this country have asked for years. Look, it's poll after poll of people saying we've had enough, we are full, we can't really afford to bring these people in. Why are they coming here? We know why they come here, because they make money out of it either in the illegal markets. They know that they've got comfortable homes, accommodation, income, and they're treated really well. And there's very little reason for them to go home because they're not going to be deported, whether they're in prison or whether they're illegally caught. And that is the reality for life of both people living here and for those who are making money out of this insidious business.
Yeah, absolutely right. Stephen, good to talk to you as ever. Thanks very much indeed. Director of Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, of course. Jane says this, morning Mike, perhaps the ones who want this war to continue, and I include MPs in it, should go to Ukraine and put their boots on the ground. Many of the public are furious the way Starmer is going about this. Exactly, I couldn't agree with you more. And one from Alan in Merseyside, I don't think Trump will be happy that Starmer in Europe have put a plan down telling him to follow. Trump wants minerals in exchange for protection. Simple. Once again, I don't think Starmer gets it. Well, no, I don't think he does either. Here's Matt on Ukraine.
Why can't two-tier Keir the turnip just turn around to Zelensky and say, now listen here, little fella, I like your little combat trousers, but we ain't got any more money. We've already sent you billions, the USA have sent you billions, you're still losing your people's lives, you're not going to win it. The UK is skint. We are on our knees. Everything is failing. So there's no more money. You can go and meet the king if you like, and just say hello, hold his little sausage fingers, fine. But that is it. Get out. There's no more left. Give up a little bit of land to Putin, shake hands, nobody more will die. But he doesn't. He does the complete opposite.
And that is the way that an awful lot of people feel in this country. And I think Keir Starmer has to be very careful that what he's doing and what he wants to do with our money is anything that he should be doing with our money. It's as simple as that, really. 8:36, I'm Mike Graham. Coming up next, we're going to find out from Harry Tanguy about a grandfather who called a neighbour a nasty name. It wasn't terrible, in a row about his dog. It sounded a bit like twit. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10. Every single weekday morning this week, Monday to Friday, 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. Last week we had a lot of excitement about bumper stickers, by the way, and we will be coming back to that because, as I explained to you last week, I'm afraid they've all been sent out, but there's many of you still waiting, and we will be getting a new batch in soon. As soon as that happens, we'll be telling you how you can get your hands on them. So we're going to make an interactive map, basically, of all the people that love Morning Glory and all the people that have the home of common sense emblazoned somewhere, either on, I've seen one on a fridge door, seen one on a garage door, seen one on the back of a car, one on the back of a bike. You know, it's all happening. Make sure you take a picture of it on your vehicle or whatever you put it on, and send it in to us here on WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000. You can email it as well if you wish. Also, as if that wasn't enough, you can win some money as well. Time's running out to get involved in our 25 grand competition. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win this life-changing amount of money for 2025. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. But time is running out. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Bill in Cheshire says this: pressure Putin and the collapse of Russia. These armchair warriors should be careful what they wish for. If the Russian state fragments and collapses, several provinces will suddenly find themselves owning large nuclear arsenals, with all the even greater security issues and dangers that will bring to the world. Well, this is the thing. Keir Starmer's got a plan, except he doesn't know what it is yet. Let's talk to Harry Tanguy, former police sergeant, of course. We've got a story today, another overreach, you might describe it as, by the police. Police officers questioned a grandfather for more than an hour after he called his neighbour a nasty name, Mrs. Twit, with a slightly different letter, if you get my meaning, in a row about his dog. This all happened in Herefordshire. Lawrence Amir, 73 years of age, was visited by the police twice at his own home and told not to use the term again. Seems a little bit over the top, doesn't it? Harry, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well. I mean, just as well they don't send the old thought police round here, because they'd hear that word quite a lot in some parts of the world. I mean, I don't know what it was like where you were, but police warning people not to say nasty words, really?
Well, the rumours in the past with that particular word was either a part of a steering mechanism of a tank or a pregnant goldfish, I heard. But I've just AI'd it, and it's none of those two. It's more about an anatomical part of a woman.
Yes.
But anyway, now we've researched that. I think the problem we have here is the experience of call takers. We used to always put the lame and the sick in desktop resolution in the police.
Right.
And so they would filter some of the calls that came in that weren't got rid of straight away. Right. And the problem you get is once it's in the system, it's quite difficult to get out of, and you need some sort of backbone to get rid of these silly calls.
Yeah.
So we always said we wanted the best people in desktop resolution, because what the problem is so you've got a neighbourly dispute. You could define it as very loosely, and then unless you are quite robust in your decision making, then you could be thinking, well, we've got to cover our backs. If this develops and then take it to the extreme, can you imagine if this ended up in someone having a knife in their chest because no police did anything about it, and they had plenty of warnings and nothing was done?
Right.
So you can see why somebody who, especially when there's a lot of weaker leadership in the police now than there was, because it's all academia and things, that it's well, we'll send a couple along, tell them to bang their heads together and stop being so silly.
Yeah.
All right, and you can, in a way, you can sort of see that. But we've really gone too far, and we need to bring it back again.
It comes back to common sense, Harry, doesn't it, really?
It does. And I was an armed response officer, but I was single crewed because I was a lot of the time, because I was the sergeant, I was a farms tactics advisor and whatever. And the units, the frontline units, used to run out in about 5 minutes, gone. So, and I was asked to go, can you go to a school? There's a 10-year-old child going mayhem and they can't control him. And I said, no, I'm not. Well, first of all, as a unit, not as an ARV unit, but it wouldn't look good, a guy going in there with a gun to sort out a 10-year-old child.
Right.
But also, I said, look, I'm sorry, but the school need to use the Children's Act and use minimal force, as a parent could be, reasonable force. But the reason the teachers don't do that, because they don't get the backing of their managers.
No.
And before they know it, they're suspended because there's a bruise on the child where the teacher had to grab the child to restrain them using reasonable force, and you know, 10-year-old children are still relatively small in size. When you get to 12 and 13, you could get a 6-foot tall one, I guess.
Right.
But it takes that to say no, because sometimes it's just easier to say, oh, yes, all right, well, we'll go. But as you say, no one's going to your burglaries anymore. So you've got to get some sort of compromise here and some robust leadership, which is backed up when things go slightly more awry than was expected. That's all.
Because you can't do everything, and the trouble is the perception, whether it's right or not, from the public's point of view, is that the police are doing all the wrong things. So there's things not being covered. There's people not being visited. People in Greater Manchester were moaning just the other week because of that woman who was visited over a Facebook post about a counsellor. They were saying, well, I had my car stolen, nobody came to see me. My daughter was groomed by a grooming gang, nobody came to see us. They can't, if they're going to do the trivial stuff, they've got to do all of it.
Well, exactly, but they're losing the trust of the public now because, quite frankly, that incident, which I've waited and waited for more to come out, and it seems it isn't, and even the police spokesperson didn't come up with extra. No. It's not good enough. You get rid of this non-hate crime incident rubbish.
Yeah.
Get rid of it, because you're losing the support of the public, and they're starting not to trust the police. Yeah. And yet, this country has lost free speech, without doubt.
No question.
Not there anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but it's going to take it's going to take a generation to clear this out from the decision making and policing now. Don't blame the front line. Please don't blame the front line, because there's no good them getting suspended for breaking an unlawful order and not going for a lawful order, rather, to make a stance. They don't need it. They're on bad enough pay as it is. They're stressed out their minds as it is. We really got to keep supporting the front line, but we've got to nip it in the bud above and cause pressure onto there above, and that concludes our useless politicians, of course.
Well, indeed, absolutely right. We're not getting any better. Harry, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Harry Tanguy, former police sergeant there, on the craziness of what some of the police are doing. Now going round to see a pensioner, grandfather, 73-year-old, for calling a woman who was one of his neighbours a name over a row about a dog. Unbelievable. Let's talk about the military, though, and military action, and whether or not people want to go and fight for their country. Paul says this, and he is, of course, a former member of the armed forces. My two kids I love. I actively made sure that they did not join the army. I discouraged it every way I could. I spent 16 years in the British Army, 9 operational tours, shot in Iraq, military cross, persecuted in inquiries, and betrayed by our government afterwards. Don't let them send our kids. And I had this conversation last week with one of the people who listens to this show, who basically said to me that he's still fighting on behalf of his own son, who was one of those red caps killed in Iraq. And he's still fighting to get compensation. He's still fighting to get some kind of apology. He's still fighting to get any sort of recompense out of this government. He says, I still have my other son, this is John Miller, his name is, basically he says he's being shunned by the MOD every time he talks to them, every time he tries to get anything out of them. He says, I still have my other son serving in the Royal Military Police now. He's older than Simon was, and that's Corporal Simon Miller, who was 21, but joined up just before Simon was killed. He rose to WO1, Class 1, and has now taken a commission and has been promoted to captain. All of this has been denied to my youngest son, whilst all involved in the military carried on with their careers with impunity. And he says, I'm sick to my stomach. £5 million was paid in foreign aid to Iraq, yet they still won't spend a single penny to arrest the known murderers of those 6 military policemen in Iraq in June 2003. Makes you think, you know, when the politicians start talking about war, start ramping up the military engagement, start talking about boots on the ground, just remember how they treat those people wearing the boots when they come home. And if they don't come home, how they treat their families. That's what I would say to you. 8:48.
A little too little, too late. I mean, those are not the comments or attitude that he was expressing in that meeting. And keep in mind that the contentious part, and you and I have been involved in contentious meetings in politics as a lawyer in business. I've never seen anything like this in public and very rarely even in private. But they were about 25 or 30 minutes into a meeting that was going very congenially When Zelensky started pushing the buttons, I think it was intended.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:51. I'm Mike Graham, with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Harry Cole, of The Sun, joins us very momentarily. Let's get a quick voice note from Neil on Ukraine.
The way I feel in this country towards Zelensky is, why should he have to give up any land to Russia? Why should he have to peacify an aggressor who attacked his nation and invaded his land? The problem is with Putin. The problem is not with Zelensky. Zelensky is a brave man defending his country, and he has every right to do so. So why the hell should he have to give up any land?
Well, he doesn't have to do anything. But the trouble is, if he doesn't do a deal, then the war continues and more people die. That would be my only answer to that one. Harry Cole's here. He's got a column in The Sun today, as he does every Monday. Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, fascinating few days. I mean, last time I spoke to you, we had no idea that all of the things that have happened have happened. I mean, the list is so long, from Annalise Dodds resigning through Keir Starmer's visit, which we talked about on Friday, but then, of course, Zelensky's visit, you know, Trump and Vance telling him that he might have to step down in order to get peace, you know, the row that then ensued. Now we've got European leaders talking about a peace deal, which is kind of what Trump wanted them to do. Your column this morning says maybe Zelensky should have played a slightly smarter hand.
Yeah, I think there's a feeling that it was a horrible thing to watch. It was not very nice. Trump was at his most boorish and belligerent and was having none of it. And a sort of dressing down that probably could have been done behind closed doors, really. I mean, Joe Biden had his moments with Zelensky, similar rows over the years, but were not done on camera. I think it was probably a mistake to have done that 45-minute sort of rambling sort of conversation in front of the world's media. But it's happened now. But I think, look, you can do two things at the same time. You can be, you know, annoyed and miffed about the situation and how it unfolded, and also sort of point out that actually, well, this is Donald Trump. Perhaps you could have seen this coming. He's vocalized his opinions on Zelensky publicly before, calling him a dictator without elections, 10 days ago. And perhaps actually a slightly more astute politician, so to speak, someone with a bit more statecraft might have seen that one coming. Look at what Keir Starmer did last week. He, you know, it was slightly undignified and slightly cringeworthy at times, but you know, he played the game. He, you know, dramatically whipped out that letter from the king. It was all about keeping Trump on side, getting through that 3-hour summit without getting his head bitten off.
Right.
Same for Macron earlier in the week, and it's just a feeling, I think, that actually diplomatically, the Trump White House and this Ukrainian administration are not seeing eye to eye, and whether the damage is done so badly that it might require a different sort of interlocutor from the Ukrainian side. That's certainly what Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, was saying publicly. You got Lindsey Graham, a big Republican senator, saying, look, if he can't play the game, and send someone else to negotiate that can. And look, lots of people were trying to give Zelensky advice before the trip, telling him perhaps, you know, maybe wear a suit, maybe lay on the charm a little bit, lay it on thick, just get through, sign the minerals deal and get out of there. And obviously that didn't happen. So diplomatic fallout behind the scenes this week.
And what do you think is going to be the view of the White House on what Starmer then does? Because Starmer then invites Zelensky into London, where they have a meeting on Saturday. He gets handed a cheque for $2.26 billion, which we're told is going to be a loan based on monies that we haven't yet acquired, I believe, from this Russian Frozen Assets Fund, which is run by the G7. It then turns out that he sends another message to the White House, really, by saying Zelensky's going to go and visit the King up at Sandringham.
Look, I think you can see Starmer's trying to play two games here. One, keep the White House on board, but also, we are the British policy of the British government is to use every tool in our asset as it stands to allow Zelensky to negotiate peace, but negotiate from a position of strength. I don't think the White House will really care that much about the Europeans kicking into action and having Zelensky there and doing that big summit yesterday. That's the point. That's what they want him.
Well, I was going to say, in some ways, that's what they wanted them to do, isn't it?
They want this not to be an American problem. You can say, well, Putin can stop the war right now. Well, the problem is that, without American funding as it stands, without the backing of Europe, Zelensky will be unable to carry on fighting much beyond this summer. He's got an aid package in place, but that's going to expire in the coming months. They're burning through the equipment, kit, missiles, ammunition, people at a very high rate. So actually, I think the view from the White House is, look, if this works, if this gets Europe to start taking this seriously, then good. And actually, look at how far people have moved. France and Britain were sort of the only ones really talking about this properly over the last couple of weeks. But now, post that summit yesterday, you've got the Germans, you got everyone else coming out and saying, the Italians as well, saying, look, yeah, we will have to do our part, and actually, things are moving much quicker than they were.
They were, but of course 3 weeks ago nobody was talking about peace at all, and it's all really as a result of J.D. Vance appearing at the Munich Security Conference, followed by what Donald Trump said.
Well, Donald Trump was elected with a mandate. He was very clear in the election that he would not be, continuing the levels of support that the previous administration, White House under Biden had done. He was very clear in the election. So there was always going to come a point when he decided to push the button, so to speak, on Ukraine. Now, look, I think there's an issue at hand, which is that Donald Trump, the master deal maker, he likes to pretend, he likes to say or boast that he could do a deal with anyone, and he said he could be able to end this war in 24 hours, and then he'd be able to end this war in a week. We're a couple of months into his administration so far, and the war looking further than ever for the peace talks looking further away than ever in some ways. Now, look, you also forget you've got to bring the Russians to the table. At the moment, the Russians are saying no dice. We're not playing. They had that awkward meeting in Saudi Arabia that didn't end in any particular success. So Trump's trying to bring the Russians to the table as much as possible, and that is what's, I think, making people feel quite uncomfortable, is that he's not criticising Putin, he's not criticising the government. He's trying to basically take a neutral stance between two warring peoples. Yes, Putin was the aggressor, and perhaps Donald Trump could make that point a little bit more, and Ukraine did not start this war. But he is desperately trying to be seen as a sort of honest broker to get the Russians to the table, and I don't know whether that's going to work. That's the thing. People like Marco Rubio are out this weekend, the Secretary of State, saying, look, we can talk about backstops and peacekeepers and underwriting future deals, but we've got to get the deal first.
Yeah, right.
At the moment, we're running before we can walk. We're talking as if the actual hardest bit of all of this has actually been done, and that's a negotiated peace between Ukraine and Putin, probably done by the Americans and the Saudis, perhaps. And that is as far away as ever yet. The Russians have not agreed to any talks yet. So I think some of the frustration coming out of the Americans is that, look, guys, you're getting ahead of yourselves. We need to talk about actually how we get the peace before we talk about the peacekeepers.
Yeah, exactly right. Harry, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Harry Cole, get his column right now in The Sun. We'll be back after the news.
Spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on the far ball. Slides
agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 9. The sun is up, ladies and gentlemen, and you probably should be as well. If you're not, you can be forgiven if you're not feeling particularly well, but I hope you're not down-timing it as you would like to under Angela Rayner's new plans, because Angela Rayner would like it to be possible for you not to be contacted if you're not at your place of work, because it's out of your time. Well, that even Jonathan Reynolds, the fake solicitor, thinks that's a bad idea, so apparently they're going to ditch that out of the new workers' rights programme. We'll tell you more about that coming up through the course of this hour. Also, of course, we'll be talking to Isabel Oakeshott and Wendy Morton MP, who's the Shadow Minister for the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. We'll find out from her what their view is currently of the Starmer summit from yesterday, where he got a lot of European leaders, plus for some reason Justin Trudeau, to sit around and all shake hands and decide it'd be great to have a plan, including, of course, Ursula von der Leyen, who said that she thinks it's very important that Europe stands up and backs Ukraine for as long as it takes. Strength is what is required, she said. When she was German Defence Minister, they ran out of guns and ammo. And they had to use broomsticks, in fact, when they were doing their exercises to practice what it would be like if their country was ever invaded by Russia. Well, good luck with that, guys, and good luck as well with any peace plan that even Keir Starmer admits won't be possible without the Americans. 0344 499 1000. How did we get here? Almost impossible to know, but it was a great big love-in over the weekend, including the passing of a cheque from Rachel Reeves to Volodymyr Zelensky for £2.26 billion. They say they're going to recoup it from the monies they've got from Russian frozen assets. Well, there's a big question mark about exactly how that money is acquired, and apparently at the moment it's in bank accounts run by the G7. So we shall see about all of that. The hand of friendship is what it says on the front page of the Mirror. Prime Minister calls for a coalition of the willing is what it says on the front page of the Times. What does that even mean? Do they even have a plan? I think the answer to that is absolutely not. 0344 499 1000. And plus we'll be talking about the psychotic Nigerian who can't be sent home, even though he's a crack dealer and an armed robber, because, of course, he's possessed. I'm not joking. Call for an exorcist. Haven't the Home Office got one? This is Morning Glory. Just before we speak to Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor, let us speak, get indeed a voice note from Mark on our borders.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. So there's 500 people crossed the channel yesterday. We're saying the migrants are asylum seekers, but how do we know they're not Russian operatives, soldiers in the pay of Russia? They could even be Syrian mercenaries. Sort of Russia's been in Syria supporting Assad. So who's to say that they're not paying Syrian mercenary soldiers to come over to pre-invade Britain on the assumption that they're going to be at war with us? I mean, who are these people? I think it's about time we stopped all this, isn't it? You can't have porous borders when you're at war. It's ridiculous.
Well, I did say this last week. You're absolutely right, Mark. We don't know who these people are. I said it was a literal mockery for Keir Starmer to talk about secure borders, to talk about safety and security at home and strength abroad, when we can't even compare ourselves to any kind of nation that's got any sort of border control at all. You know, we can't even, as somebody pointed out earlier today, protect the border of Kent, never mind Kiev. Both begin with K, as do many other words. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Oh, morning. Yeah, I mean, what an absolute joke. All this rhetoric, all this bombast, you know, we're extending the hand of friendship and we're going to do whatever it takes. And as the caller said just now, we can't even protect our own coastline. And I think it's very hard, you know, for voters to accept more and more billions going out the door on Ukraine, which is a worthy cause in theory, when they see more and more unknown hundreds of individuals on any given day coming over to our country. It's not ridiculous to say, who are these people? And in a war context, what ill might they do us?
Right. Quite, and we've never known who they are, and we still don't. And as far as we know from yesterday, we had a call from one of our compadres in Folkestone who was listening to the helicopter flying over his house all night last night because they were bringing 500 migrants in, basically on a mixture of RNLI boats and Border Force boats and a bit of air sea rescue while they were at it. And the biggest single number of people who have actually been brought into this country illegally since the beginning of the year. And it's only going to get worse because the weather's going to be quite nice. The seas are relatively calm. I was down there on the coast yesterday, and it's just incredible that nobody seems to care and put the two things together.
It is incredible. It beggars belief. I mean, how's that smashing the vile criminal gangs going? It's going precisely nowhere.
Yeah.
The numbers are going to be off the chart. As you say, unusually, they've actually remained pretty steady all the way through the winter, which just goes to show the growing level of confidence and brazenness on the part of those supposed smashed gangs. They're not in the least bit cowed by this government's empty rhetoric on the crossings.
No.
On the contrary, they're just scaling up their operations. So it makes no sense whatsoever to be talking about using our armed forces, our very depleted armed forces, to go and shore up the sovereignty of Ukraine until we can shore up our own sovereignty. There is an absolute direct contradiction there.
There absolutely is. And this meeting of the great European leaders, you know, as I was saying, you know, these people 3 weeks ago had no clue about having any kind of peace deal for Ukraine. They've only really got the idea because J.D. Vance wound them all up and Donald Trump did the same thing. But the idea that they're all standing around, as you say, you know, threatening to put boots on the ground, threatening to stand up for as long as it takes, you know, as it was pointed out by Ralph Schulhammer, who I had on the show earlier, even the president of Luxembourg was offering to stand for Ukraine. Well, I'm sure that puts the scares the living daylights out of Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin.
I mean, this is so transparent what is happening here. It's so obvious what's happening here with Keir Starmer. And, you know, it pains me to say it, that he actually, if you don't see through this, he is actually looking kind of good at the moment. From a very, very, very low base. He is actually looking like someone who matters a little bit. And as some of your contributors were pointing out earlier, kind of making the most of the latitude that we have as a result of Brexit to kind of play the middleman, the honest broker between the EU member states and America. And, you know, fine, this is politics. I get it. You know, he's got that opportunity and he's leaning into it. But none of it really is going to stack up to a row of beans. And the reason is because it comes back to the point that I made very early on in this, and many others will have made, which is, what structure are these supposed peacekeeping forces going to operate under?
Right.
If it isn't NATO, what is it? Because you can't just willy-nilly send troops from various countries in a coalition of the willing without a command structure, and that command structure will be NATO. It has to be. I don't know what other structure would exist unless it's sovereign structures, but then we wouldn't be in a coalition.
Well, that's the other problem, because Vladimir Putin has said he won't accept any peacekeeping force from Europe as part of any settlement of any kind. He's also said he doesn't want any settlement of any kind. You know, Zelensky won't give up any land. So it's all a hiding to nothing. But the worry I've got is that Keir Starmer quite enjoys looking good, and as much as it's meaningless, and as Peter Hitchens said, Starmer may strut the world, but he's no more powerful than the king of Legoland, which I think is right. You know, he might just take us into a place we don't want to go.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go anywhere where he's leading, that's for sure.
Well, that's absolutely right.
And yeah, he's enjoying his little moment. You know, you can see how gratifying it is for a prime minister that's had nothing but bad publicity for ever since the beginning of his regime, finally gets to play the big King Kong. It's just empty. That's what worries me about it. You know, it's just people sitting around in a room going, we're going to do whatever it takes. Guys, you haven't done what it takes for the last decade and more. You've allowed your armed forces to become totally depleted. And now what, you just belatedly realise that you need to reach into your back pocket and pull something out. Well, it's not going to be so much of as a little platoon at this point.
No, exactly. Well, Con Coughlin, whose views on military matters I take quite seriously for the Telegraph, wrote, basically, this was a summit of wishful thinking, which I think is absolutely spot on. It's exactly what it is. It all looks nice, and they're talking about having a plan and forming a peace idea and then taking it to Donald Trump and getting him to agree with it. You know, it's all a very long way off from actually stopping the war.
It's a very long way off, and as you said, the problem is that the two sides are intractable. I mean, Zelensky naturally doesn't want to give up any land. Putin is now, unfortunately, massively empowered. And, you know, I do think it's a great source of regret that, you know, Trump didn't mete out the same treatment to Putin. You know, if he's going to give a very public dressing down, I understand there might be strategic reasons to do that. Well, please do the same for Putin, and then we can get what you're trying to do here. It looked very unbalanced, you know, in terms of what was fair and what wasn't, because in the end, one person did start this, and it wasn't President Zelensky.
No, of course. But is it not now the case, though, Isabel, when you look at all of the things that have happened over the weekend and all of the kind of, you know, the optics, which have seemed to be more important than the substance, it all looks a bit performative to me. You know, I'm sure that what happened in the Oval Office was cooked up in one way, shape or form, whether it was something that happened spontaneously because of the fact that it was an accident waiting to happen anyway, I don't know. But, I mean, I don't think anything that Donald Trump does is an accident. I don't think he loses his temper. I think he pretends to lose his temper. You know, Piers Morgan was talking about this on Laura Kunsberg yesterday. He says, you know, he shouts at everybody. He does it for effect. He moves the argument along. He gets somewhere else. You know, it's all, and the same with what happened over the weekend here. You know, it's all for the cameras. It's all for, you know, a little video you can put out with some music behind it. You know, it's almost like we live now in a television age of reality politics, TV.
Well, he literally said that. I mean, the president of the United States literally said, well, this will make great TV.
Yeah.
And you know, I personally found that pretty distasteful. And I'm the last person to want to go along with a, you know, liberal establishment on anything, really. But it was distasteful because war is not reality TV. And Trump seemed to me to be rather playing that kind of...
But you see, for me, and I agree with you on that, but I also think that what we saw yesterday with all the shaking of hands and the hugging and the way that they had people, I don't know where they found the people to cheer in Downing Street, because I've never heard them since they faked it when Tony Blair became Prime Minister, you know, cheering as Keir Starmer gave Zelensky a hug. I mean, you can have it a laugh.
I agree, and I think actually that the view, and it'd be interesting to see some really up-to-date polling on this, that the view of what we kind of rather lazily call ordinary voters. I'm talking not the chin-stroking people that read the Financial Times and, you know, that pour through the comment and the analysis in The Economist. I'm talking about your average voter. I think we would find that the view is much more balanced than perhaps the establishment impression is given.
Yeah.
Yes, people were very supportive of Ukraine in the early days, but after years of seeing billions of dollars go out the door, billions of British taxpayer money go out the door with no realistic prospect of any peace if we keep doing the same, if everybody keeps doing the same as they did before. People naturally get weary. It's not that there's no shame in that. It's understandable. You know, they lose track of what it was all for in the first place, and there were good reasons for it, absolutely. And they begin to see that there's a trade-off. Of course there's a trade-off. You know, if you're spending billions of pounds arming Ukraine in a conflict, ultimately it cannot win, certainly not without America, then those billions of pounds are not available to reduce your tax bill or to provide better this or better that, and Lord knows we need that. I think that the argument that will resonate with people is, why can't we release these Russian frozen assets and use that for this effort? Because they're vast numbers of hundreds of billions. And at the moment, all that's being used is the interest on that.
Because I think there may be some legal difficulty with it, as far as I understand it, and it's all held by the G7 in some kind of weird place. So I think it's not as straightforward as they would suggest that it is. Isabel, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott Talks international editor. Wendy Morton MP joins us now, Shadow Minister for Foreign, Commonwealth and the Development Office. Wendy, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's a lovely sunny day down there, but I know it's a bit cold, so my apologies if you've been standing there too long.
It is a little bit chilly this morning.
It is. Let me just, I've got to sort of, I don't know if you can answer this as a constitutional question. I mean, if Keir Starmer believes that boots on the ground are going to be the solution for peacekeeping in Ukraine, does he have to come before Parliament? And at what point does he have to come before Parliament to see whether people want to actually commit to that in this country?
Well, I think on the point of boots on the ground, I think it's really important that there's a lot of speculation at the moment, and I think we've had this summit over the weekend, and certainly from my perspective as Shadow Foreign Minister and as a Member of Parliament representing a constituency, I want to understand a little bit more about what was discussed and agreed at that summit. So I'm hoping that when Keir Starmer comes to the House of Commons to make a statement this afternoon, we start to see that clarity, because that's what we will be asking for. As to the legalities, or does it have to come to the House, I think that again is something that we need. If that's the situation that where we are to get to, it's important that we understand what input, if any, Parliament would have in that circumstance.
Yes, because I mean the Speaker of the House is always quite unhappy if things are announced outside of Parliament before they've been announced in Parliament, and presumably this weekend was one of those such occasions, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, the Speaker has always been very clear that any minister is expected to make announcements to the House of Commons first, and he gets very irritated, and quite understandably, and for those of us on the opposition benches it's deeply frustrating and it's deeply disrespectful. But I think the point here to remember is there's been speculation over the weekend. Let's see what the Prime Minister comes with today. I think it's important in circumstances like this, we all remain calm yet pragmatic, and that, you know, while speculation is always inevitable in these cases, sometimes a running commentary is not always helpful.
No, it's not, especially if it's coming from the Prime Minister. What about the Chagos Islands? There's some suggestion that that deal may actually go through later this week. I know that your leader, Kemi Badenoch, is not in favour of it. The Tories have been accused of starting the conversation about giving the Chagos Islands away to Mauritius. What's the Tory position if it looks like that's going to happen this week?
So look, again on the Chagos, again that I don't know if it's going to happen this week. Again, that is speculation. So we will be calling for answers on that. We've been very, very clear on our position with regards to the Chagos Islands. And it was this Labour government, it was this Foreign Secretary that decided, he chose to pick up those negotiations and to conclude them in a very, very rushed fashion, which has always left a lot of questions. The question now is, if they are going to seek to push this through, how much is it going to cost, and where is the money going to come from? You know, we've heard £9 billion, we've heard £18 billion, but we've never had the confirmation or the clarity, nor have we had any clarity as to, is that coming out of the defence budget, is it coming out of ODA budgets? Is it money that's been, put to one side for any deal? Is it going to be paid over 1 year, over many years? There are so many questions that, try as we may, the Labour government have failed to provide us with the answers for the British people.
Wendy Morton, thank you very much indeed. Wendy Morton MP, Shadow Minister of Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office there. Let's get a voice note from Sean.
Hello, Mike. It's Sean from Bristol. I think Starmer's just doing it because he's tanking in the polls, and he thought because Maggie Thatcher got a bit of a boost from the Falklands War, he wants to take us into another war or that type of thing, because he thinks he's going to get his poll ratings back up.
I think there's definitely a part of that which is true, because all politicians at the end of the day know that a war or stroke, some kind of national emergency will always focus the minds. I mean, it wasn't always good for Boris Johnson when COVID happened. However, it was probably something that did him more of a favour initially because it made everybody watch him, it made everybody listen to him, and it made all the other political parties kind of coalesce around him. You've seen it here already. Reform have got a slightly different view, but it looks like the Tories and Keir Starmer and the Lib Dems, they're all in sort of lockstep with one another. Saw Ed Davey on TV at the weekend, heaven help us, with his views on all sorts of things. I mean, he's one of the people, I think, calling for Donald Trump to be refused another state visit, because he's such a nasty man. Here's one from Guy. It says, it's become obvious that not only is Trump the leader of the free world, he's the only leader in the free world. And Sally says this, 500 in on Saturday. How many hotels is that? There's a whisper that a new hotel is going to be built on a service area near me. I bet it won't be for travelling businessmen. Are new hotels having to be built now to accommodate these criminals? Great show as always. Well, Sally, we had the news, did we not, over the weekend, I think I read the story, that basically there's now more illegal migrants going into hotels than ever, despite the fact that Keir Starmer said that they were going to phase out the use of illegal migrant hotels and they were going to start deporting more people. It is absolutely ridiculous. Colin says, morning, Mike. If Prime Minister Starmer ever mentions the word conscription for young people, boats will stop coming and this country will empty faster than a bath when you pull the plug out. And Ian says, Mike, if we are on a war footing, then the Home Office has even more power to ignore the ECHR as national security trumps any ECHR clause. Well, I mean, there's all sorts of things being done in the name of a possible war footing, including handing out yet more billions of pounds to Ukraine, announcing that there's going to be a plan to basically support Ukraine for as long as it takes. That's what Starmer said yesterday. And, of course, the idea that somehow we may even be needing to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine. Well, who said that was an OK thing to do? Coming up, we'll talk to Colonel James Sunderland, former Tory MP, who also had a 27-year military career before that. So we'll get his view on it, of course, as well. And we'll have a look a little bit more about what Starmer's been saying.
if you'd have turned down the sound...
You're a terrorist sympathiser. That's great to know.
I'm not a terrorist sympathiser in any way, state or form. But if you turned down the sound and looked at the images that were being shown to you,
you'd have noticed the terrible continuity.
No, it wouldn't.
The fact that the kid had a different haircut in every scene, different clothes. It was an amateur hour production.
It wouldn't have been propaganda. I've watched quite a few.
Come on, Simon, you cannot defend this. The BBC has really ballsed up it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:27. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Just another half an hour or so. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here with her take on everything between 10 and 1. I was making a list of all the things that have happened, really, since I was last on the air on Friday. It was Annalisa Dodds quits her role as a minister in the Department for Foreign Aid, basically, foreign development. Trump and Zelensky had their bust up in the Oval Office. Zelensky was then kicked out of the White House by all intents and purposes. Trump then demands an apology. We then get Zelensky decided to visit Keir Starmer in London. Rachel Reeves, that is, signs away £2.6 billion to Zelensky in money that they say has come from frozen Russian assets. The US then says that Zelensky wasted his chance at the White House, should have signed a deal for the mineral rights of Ukraine, didn't do it. And then Trump said that actually he doesn't think Zelensky wants peace. Starmer then offers Zelensky a meeting with King Charles. Russia then involves themselves and says that Donald Trump actually is all about common sense, and that's why he's leading the charge for the peace deal. Euro summit is then hastily arranged. They all fly in to London. Starmer then sells £1.6 billion worth of missiles to Vladimir Zelensky. And meanwhile, that afternoon, Zelensky meets King Charles at Sandringham. I think that pretty much covers all of it. It's a whirlwind, isn't it? It's hard to keep up. Colonel James Sunderland is here. I wonder what's going to happen today. It's like that Super Bowl ad they used to do. What are you going to do tomorrow? Former Tory MP, also 27-year military career. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. It's not dull, is it?
It certainly isn't dull, and I don't think I missed anything out there, but I mean, it is extraordinary how quickly these things are moving. I've been talking to various different guests today. 3 weeks ago, nobody in Europe had a Scooby, as we used to say in Scotland, about having a peace deal. Suddenly now they're all at it.
It's extraordinary. I play with a straight bat, and I'm going to give Starmer some credit, actually. He had a really good week last week, probably his best week as the Prime Minister. He has secured what he wanted to from the US president. He's come back. Zelensky's flown back into his arms, and he's now brokering deals and leading Europe and doing pretty well. I don't believe it's a distraction from domestic politics. Clearly, his ratings are tanking. This is what any British Prime Minister should and must do. But he's doing pretty well. Let's give him a chance.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a distraction at all. I'm not one of those. I do happen to think it's always a welcome distraction for him, though, for any Prime Minister and for any leader of any country. If things are not going brilliantly domestically, and let's face it, they're not, if you suddenly have some kind of international crisis on your hands, it doesn't augur badly unless you make a complete balls of it. But I think the problem is for Starmer that he doesn't really know what the answer is, and he does know that whatever the answer is, it involves America. So he's got to keep them on side. He's got to keep the Europeans on side, some of whom are a bit less friendly towards Donald Trump perhaps than he is. And it is impossible, is it not, to do a deal between two countries who don't want to do a deal with each other.
It's interesting, Mike, isn't it? Because as a politician, you hope that there's some sort of template, some sort of guide that's going to get you to the right answer. Well, that guide doesn't exist. This is very much about policy on the hoof. This is about reacting. and proactively looking forward to things that are happening. And what Starmer is doing is effectively making it up as he goes along. But he has no choice. And actually, it's about informed judgment. It's about the right advice. It's also about making sure that Ukraine is not cut adrift and that Russia is not given that blank check for regrouping and then reinvading Western Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't expect you to have a sort of up and ready answer for me, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What would you do?
I think, to be fair, I think Starmer's four-point plan is about right. I mean, what we have to do is show solidarity and support for Ukraine. It's entirely right that we're using frozen Russian assets now to pay for more equipment. Of course, these are loans, effectively, not gifts. I think it's very important that Europe sticks together, that Europe backs Zelensky, that Europe does provide some sort of security guarantee as best it can for Ukrainian security. Ukraine is not an Article 5 country. It can't rely upon NATO support. Trump made that clear last week. So I think Europe's going to have to go alone now, with or without US support.
Well, Starmer doesn't think they can, though. And I mean, the problem is with that scenario is that, one, Putin has said he doesn't want any European peacekeepers involved. And so presumably that would be a red line for him. And as far as the loans are concerned, I mean, is there any actual real likelihood that the loans would be repaid?
Well, I think there's every chance that the UK could agree a deal with Ukraine for mineral access and mineral rights. And why not? The US are going to do it. I think Zelensky's going to sign it. So, you know, the UK should be looking at what favours the UK at the same time. And, you know, let's be quite ulterior about it, as well as providing that support. Ukraine has a lot that we want: energy, power, foodstuffs, the list goes on. So I think we can do a deal with Ukraine as well. But importantly, and this is really, really important now, militarily, Europe should be able to overmatch Russia without US support. That's where Trump wants to go. That's what is in Trump's mind now. Russian forces are depleted. He's lost a lot of people. You know, his military is broken. So I think it's quite reasonable to think that Europe could provide some sort of security guarantee for Ukraine. And if boots are put on the ground, then so be it. We've had British forces supporting Ukraine since 2014 on something called Operation Orbital. We've got a lot of people in Poland right now supporting supply chains. The list goes on. So I think that a peacekeeping deal with European countries at its heart is not beyond the realms of possibility if we are serious about keeping Ukraine safe.
But Zelensky says he won't accept Russia keeping any land that they've somehow managed to occupy, and I'm told it's about 20% of Ukraine right now. So how do you solve that problem?
Well, that's a strategic choice he has to make. So, for example, it should be possible with the weapons that he's got and the defensive positions that he's made to keep Russia out of Western Ukraine. There is almost a line there now where forces are not progressing across. But I suspect that
but they're in 20% of the rest of it in eastern Ukraine.
Agreed. But is Ukraine genuinely, with the resources it has and the military backing that it's got, going to eject Russian forces from eastern Ukraine by force? Probably not. We are at a bit of a stalemate at the moment. Putin is not going to give that territory up, particularly if there's a peace deal in the offing between Putin and Ukraine. So I think basically what we've got is a bit of a stalemate now, and I can't see that line changing a great deal.
No, I can't either. So it's kind of unrealistic, isn't it, for people to say, well, there can be no peace unless Putin withdraws out of all the areas that he's currently occupying. That's just not realistic.
Not realistic at all. I mean, don't forget, it was 2 years in the offing. You know, we knew that Russian forces had been built up. We knew that logistically they were setting up for an invasion. I think the final coup de grace in intelligence terms was the realisation that there were foodstuffs and blood on the border. So we knew that the Russians were going in. Ben Wallace got it right all the way along. Putin said publicly, and don't forget, he was in Cornwall for the G7. He said publicly to Western leaders' faces that he wasn't going to invade. Weeks later, he did. So he's a man that cannot be trusted. My suspicion is that Putin will use any peace deal now to regroup, to rearm, and perhaps to plan the next phase, which is to go further west. So I think it's really important that whatever deal we put together now, we do have that security of Western Ukraine at the forefront of our minds.
OK. Let's have a quick look at what Keir Starmer said yesterday to Laura Kunsberg about lasting peace and what Donald Trump wants.
Well, I'm clear in my mind that he wants a lasting peace. That comes from my discussions with him on Thursday. We had extensive discussions. I've obviously met him before that, back in September in New York, and I've talked to him a number of times on the phone, including Friday night and Saturday night. So my strong view is that he wants a lasting peace. And I agree with him about that. President Zelensky agrees with him about that. And I think nobody wants this conflict to go on, least of all the Ukrainians. It's not in our national interest.
Well, it depends on what Ukrainians you speak to, really, doesn't it? Because some Ukrainians don't want Zelensky in charge anymore. Some Ukrainians don't want to give up any land. Some Ukrainians, apparently a growing number, have accepted that they may have to give up something.
I agree. Ukrainian parliament's quite split on this. Clearly, Zelensky is the current president. He's done a pretty good job. He has shown great leadership. I'm not an expert on domestic Ukraine politics, but quite clearly the issue is this. If a peace deal depends on Russian forces moving back into Russia, and therefore the territory that's been captured in eastern Ukraine and going back to the Ukrainians, that's not going to happen. Putin's not going to give it up. And does Ukraine have the military capability and the will and the resources and the might to take eastern Ukraine back from the Russians? I don't think so. So I'm afraid that word stalemate is there. Starmer is absolutely right in wanting peace in Ukraine. Zelensky wants that. Trump wants that. What Putin wants, who knows? But my honest view now is that this is about a peace deal. This is about consolidating. This is about geopolitical awareness, and this is very much about Ukraine, perhaps safeguarding what it's now got left.
Indeed. Colonel James Sunderland, thank you very much indeed. Former Tory MP, 27-year military career man as well. Paul says this, Mike, while Starmer is making you concentrate on Ukraine, nobody's talking about illegal migrants, Pakistani rape gangs, knife crime, robberies, taxes up, fuel bills, farmers and food prices. Watch out for laws being passed by sleight of hand while you're distracted. We've literally talked about all of those, Paul, this morning. It's literally a summation of the show. We talked about every single one of those things. You know, nothing gets past us here at Morning Glory. We're not going to be distracted. Let's get a voice note from Dave.
Hi, Mike. For that immigrant to say that he's possessed by the devil, and for the judge to uphold that decision, surely they must prove the devil exists, don't they?
Well, now you're talking. I'm not sure that the Immigration Tribunal Panel A has the wherewithal to find out whether the devil exists. Although, you know, I would certainly use that if I was a lawyer. I would say, well, prove it. How do you prove you're possessed? It's complete madness, isn't it? 9:38.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:40. I'm Mike Graham with you until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brew will be along very shortly. Gordon in Wiveliscombe, not sure where that is, says, Mike, I love you, but I'm sickened by the cowardice of some of my fellow countrymen. How many times has Putin threatened to incinerate our children, poisoned our people, and wants nothing more than for us to roll over? Surrender, capitulation and submission are not peace. My childhood house was peaceful because our father was a violent thug. Sorry to hear that. Stand and fight, we're British. Well, I'm not sure you're going to get stand and fight as an idea over the line. For example, I think an awful lot of people don't want to stand and fight, and an awful lot of people don't want their children to go and stand and fight either, because the cause may well be just, but as Keir Starmer said, for as long as it takes could mean an awful lot of dead people. I'm not sure we've got the stomach for that, to be honest. And on the subject of the police coming round for you saying hurty words, Johnny Rugby says, getting a visit from the police for calling your neighbour a naughty word, there's a way round that. Call your neighbour a Keir, as it means the same thing. Simple. Yeah. Well, maybe they'll start criminalising you calling people Keir. You never know. Let's talk to Vix Layton, consumer expert, co-host of the Spendology podcast. There's a couple of stories today that we've wanted to talk to her about. W.H. Smith's name soon to disappear from British high streets after more than 230 years of trading. I mean, their shops have been disappearing on a fairly regular basis for a while. They're going to concentrate on their bigger shops in airports and railway stations and things. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Vix, very good morning to you.
Good morning. So, yeah, it will be very sad to see W.H. Smith's go, but in that same way that I felt sad when Woolworths went, I actually can't remember the last time I'd spent money there. And I think this is, unfortunately, we are very nostalgic for the high street, but we're responsible for this because we're not supporting them. With the sort of rise of things like Amazon coming in, you can buy your charging cables elsewhere, you can buy your books cheaper elsewhere, and you can buy your stationery. You've got a broader range of stationery, again, available online in smaller stores that are specialists. Is there a need for this on the high street anymore? And I guess that is the question.
Yeah, and I guess the difficulty for that question to be answered is there a need for any shops on the high street anymore? Because an awful lot of our high streets are kind of, full of empty shops and full of shop fronts that used to be full and are not any longer. And so I guess, the mixture of rates for those businesses going up through the roof, the parking problems that people have where they don't visit the high street because it's too expensive to park the car, or you might get a ticket. And it's just easier for a lot of people, isn't it, not to do it?
It is, and there have been changes to national insurance as well, which means it's actually much more expensive for shops now to staff their shops. And they've got hundreds of stores, no one's going to them. What are they to do? What are they to do about it? And we won't see it go away totally. They will remain at train stations and also at airports. So you'll still be able to get your last-minute charger or pick up a book if you've forgotten it. But if you took away the name W.H. Smith and you described the kind of things that they sold, I don't think anybody pitching this business to Alan Sugar would say, yeah, we really need this now.
Yeah,
so.
And I mean, funnily enough, I was in the big W.H. Smiths in Victoria a little while ago, and I went in looking for a magazine, which I couldn't find. They literally had every single other magazine under the sun than the one I wanted. They didn't have it. But they also had a big section on food, like loads of sandwiches and, drinks and stuff like that. And I wonder whether that's kind of affected them as well, because they've sort of gone into all these different places. I mean, I've never understood why people would buy a sandwich from Boots or W.H. Smith's. They don't make food.
It's convenience at the end of the day. You're in there on lunch, like you said, you're looking for a specific magazine, or you need to buy some pens because you're going to a meeting, and you've not got a lot of time. So I think they were desperately trying to find a reason to exist beyond what they had in their original offering. And a lot of places, you can go in Superdrug now and they've got sandwiches, and I would say the same thing. I'm like, yeah, I'll go in there for a lipstick, but I don't want a meal deal. So
no, exactly.
I think, they're just finding, like I said, a reason to exist, a reason for people to spend slightly more. Just put one other thing in the basket, and they've been sort of flailing around for a while. But interestingly, the guy that's taken on HMV and made that successful again, he is interested in buying these shops. So it's intriguing to see where this will go. But yeah, it's a sad loss to the high street because it is an icon. But again, maybe it is time to retire it before it sort of completely falls into
possibly so. I mean, all you get nowadays whenever you go anywhere is just coffee shop after coffee shop after coffee shop. I mean, when's that craze going to die out?
I know. people have an insatiable thirst for coffee, apparently, and you're seeing them also trying to sort of fight for market leadership, because I don't think people have got a lot of loyalty, and you've seen these schemes come in where it's like pay this amount of money and get discount off your coffee, but then they've given you too good a deal and people are too loyal, so they've taken it away. It'll be interesting. I wonder what the high street will look like in 5 years' time.
Yes, well, let's hope it looks better than it does now. We shall see. Vix, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Vix Layton, consumer expert, co-host of the Spendology podcast. High Street really is. I mean, Reform have got a plan to rejuvenate high streets, which they'll be talking about all through the course of the next couple of weeks. But, you know, there's definitely parts of this country where the high street is just not very pleasant, not a great place to go. Let's get a voice note from Darren.
Morning, Mike. Darren from Suffolk. Great show as ever. Listen, all these experts you keep getting on that say that Putin's going to reorganise and then push further west. I mean, this guy has spent 3 years and he hasn't even taken 10% of Ukraine. I mean, come on, he's had hundreds of thousands of people killed of his troops. It's showed that his tanks are just not up to date. He's not very good, basically, and I just don't believe he's got the capability of moving any further west. It's just propaganda.
Well, you do wonder, because they always say the same thing. One, you know, we can beat him because he's got a terribly bad army. And on the other hand, but if we don't do that, he's going to invade all loads of other countries, which he hasn't invaded so far. I mean, I don't know. Let's face it, says Robert in Hitchin, Starmer is just eyeing up a Nobel Peace Prize, just like he wanted to be PM. Doesn't really care what else happens. Totally delusional. Well, of course, if he does win a Nobel Peace Prize, he'll have to remember how to pronounce it. Because the last time he introduced somebody who'd had the Nobel Peace, he called it a Mobile Peace Prize, remember? He couldn't get it right. How about this from Ellie in Wales? Mike, I don't want a nuclear war. I'm decorating my lounge this year. It's the greatest reason ever not to have a nuclear war. Maybe we should do that tomorrow. Why don't you want to have a nuclear war? Well, I'm decorating my lounge, you see. Also, the photo of the warmongers yesterday in Lancaster House looks more like a Sesame Street audition. Yeah, which one's Big Bird? Yeah, and why has old Justin Trudeau got blackface on? We told you about that before, Justin. Told you about that. You can't do that in Europe anymore. It's illegal. This is Talk.
You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:51. Julie Hartley-Brew will be here in about 8 minutes' time to tell us what's coming up on her show from 10 until 1, of course. Chrissy Wallacey says, what about the Polish criminal who can't be sent back to Poland because he claims he didn't speak Polish? Yeah, I mean, apparently there is such a story. We might get stuck into that one tomorrow because we're kind of out of time right now. Let's talk, though, now to Lord Craig McKinley, Director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation, newly appointed. Just before we do that, Lord Craig, let me play you this. This is, of course, Keir Starmer when he talks about the Nobel Peace Prize.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace Nobel Prize winner.
Sorry, I mean, I had to say it because somebody said that's what he's after. I can't help it. It has to be done. Let's talk to Lord Craig McKinley, newly appointed Director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Lord Craig, very good morning to you. Welcome to Morning Glory.
Yeah, good to be on again, Mike. Been a while.
It has been, and congratulations to you, by the way. This is a step in what I would regard the right direction. And no doubt there'll be some zealots on the side of Ed Miliband who don't quite agree. But you've always spoken common sense about this net zero business. There's a piece in the Telegraph today which says the net zero drivers made families poorer, according to an analysis by investment bank Peel Hunt. And I mean, in these dangerous times in which we now appear to be living, surely net zero has to go on the back burner, doesn't it?
Well, one would hope so. You look at the deindustrialisation of Britain. We're now not making virgin steel anymore, the only G20 country that does not have that capacity. We're not making aluminium from bauxite, and we have the highest energy prices for business generally. We're now seeing the closure of this good old Stoke potteries. Yeah. And what will happen with all these industries? They'll simply be made abroad in India or China on the back of cheap coal energy, and we'll be putting these products on a diesel ship back to the UK and patting ourselves on the back by saying how CO2 free and somehow just we've become. It's all a sham. It's all a nonsense. It's making us poorer. It's making us actually less resilient, and we're actually increasing our energy insecurity because Miliband's mad new output. I mean, I'm not going to defend my old government. We started a lot of this nonsense, but Miliband is sort of upping the ante on this and making it even more mad than it ever could be by not extracting gas and oil from the North Sea, pretty much turning the taps off on that, and not allowing fracking, and all the while we simply import £30 billion a year's worth of oil and gas out of the same basin of the North Sea, of course, from Norway. And we enrich Qatar, and we will surely, I'm sure we will, be spending even more in Trump's US as he goes for drill, baby, drill, because we need the gas. It's a reliable energy. It's a cheap energy. It's actually quite a low CO2 energy, rather better than cutting down virgin forests in the US and burning it in the UK and claiming that is somehow a renewable biofuel. Yes. We have seen just layers of nonsense in this whole net zero argument. I'm trying to get a bit of common sense back, not just for common sense sake, which is always welcome on your show, I'm sure. Indeed. But for the sake of Britain. For the sake of Britain PLC, who is in its death throes, frankly.
Well, quite. I mean, wouldn't it be nice as well if we could actually get something to go down in price? Because, I mean, only next month we're going to get the old energy caps going up again. We'll be paying yet more money for our electricity. I think another £111 on average is going up. And it seems to me incredible that people like Miliband and his team and the Climate Change Committee and all of that, they just think that they're on this kind of, crusade of morality, and they think virtue signalling their way to heaven, presumably, by means of a hot air balloon or something. I don't know.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. They seem to think that Britain's 1% of global output, if we can snuff that out completely, and obviously with it, all British energy and telling us we can't fly anymore and we can't eat meat and whatever other nonsense they come up with. I think they even said the petrol lawnmower should be consigned to the bin. Yeah. I mean, these people are not in the real world. I can be absolutely sure there'll be plenty of petrol lawnmowers going up and down lawns in China and elsewhere forevermore. So this is the lunacy of it. use and output of CO2 is escalating. So is India, so is Indonesia, so is Africa, so is just about everywhere in the world. But no, if we virtue signal enough, it's almost a bit like saying, from the Labour viewpoint, smash the gangs. Say that enough, it might happen. They're saying if Britain can stop the CO2, then we'll suddenly be responsible for improving the entirety of global climate.
Yes.
It is a nonsense. I mean, I've seen many things in life. I fought against Britain's membership in the European Union for 30 years, finally got there one way or another. I see this as my new crusade. And do you know what, Mike? I think this is actually more costly and more interfering with the way we live than anything I've ever endeavoured before. So this is a really important battle, and I'm really proud to be becoming the director of the GWPF. That was started up by Lord Lawson in 2009 to continue his inheritance of common sense. And let's start talking about climate once more, not deriding people who dare put their head above the parapet and say, hold on, I think there's something else going on here, and what about the cost? Not pointing them and screaming. Let's have a sensible debate, because we're talking about the future of Britain here.
Absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Lord Craig McKinley, thank you very much indeed, and congratulations again on becoming the director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation, an organisation that is very commonsensical. Of course it is. Julia Hartley-Brewer is here. Very good morning to you.
I do love a bit of Craig.
I do love a bit of Craig.
So glad he's still on political front lines. Right about everything.
He is.
Literally everything.
I've just got a little...
You're not today, though.
Well, hang on.
Got a boat to pick with you.
I've got a voice note here from JB, is it?
It's pointless putting this country on a war footing, because with all the wokery and everything we have to think about, nobody will be able to go to war to fight if they had to, because it might hurt somebody.
Well, they might. Well, you know, the army's already woke. We heard this last week, where a guy who works in the army said he got a phone call in his barracks. He said, "Can you mind going and checking all the bulletin boards, make sure nobody's using the word manpower?"
Don't.
I'm not joking.
No, I know. It's
There's some Russians outside. Never mind them.
Don't worry about them.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway, how's your electric tank?
My electric tank. I mean, that's totally true. It's totally true. But seriously, it's really, really clear to me. There's no debate. You're either on the side of... Donald Trump's made this whole thing, I'm on the side of peace. Peace on what terms? We are absolutely talking about whether or not we stand up for democracy, Western values, and against dictators and aggressors. I don't know why anyone thinks that Putin signing any peace deal, saying anything at all, is actually going to be deterred and is not going to go for more territory. Not just in Ukraine, Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. He has no end to his ambition.
But all the people on your side of the argument say that he's nearly beaten, that his defences are down, his military's hopeless, it's old-fashioned, it's not any good.
I'm not saying that.
Well, yeah, but everybody else is.
I mean, he hasn't won because he thought he'd win in 3 days, and he's 3 years on and he's only got 20% of Ukraine.
But then the same people say, oh, but he's going to invade Belarus next, and you go, we got it both ways.
Well, he doesn't need to invade Belarus, it's already a vassal state.
He's either got, you know, a very, very dangerous army, which we all have to fight.
Well, he does have a dangerous army. They've killed tens of thousands of Ukrainians.
Yes, they have. And I'm not in any way